The client's voice was a drill in my ear. A tiny, tinny drill boring through the phone's speaker and straight into my skull. It doesn't pop, Kevin. You get what I mean? It needs more pop. I stared at the logo on my monitor. It was a minimalist, sharp design for a new brand of artisanal dog food. It popped so hard it was practically a firework. I'd spent 2 days on the kerning alone. I'll see what I can do, Mark, I said. My own voice was flat, dead. Great, awesome. Just, make it pop. He hung up. I tossed the phone onto the sofa cushion next to me. It bounced once. The screen stayed lit, a lonely rectangle of light in the dim apartment. My apartment. My tomb. For a graphic design freelancer, you'd think I'd have better lighting. But I liked it this way. Muted. Gray. No one to bother me. I leaned my head back, the worn fabric of the sofa scratching my neck. I should make coffee. A real cup. The good stuff. Not the instant crap. But that meant getting up. Walking the 10 feet to the kitchen. Grinding beans. Boiling water. It felt like planning an Arctic expedition. Fuck it. I'll just scroll. I picked up the phone. My thumb moved on its own. A dance it had perfected over thousands of hours. Swipe up. Scroll. A picture of my cousin's kid. A meme about cats. An ad. My thumb stopped. Obsidian roast coffee. Dark. Bold. Delivered in 30 minutes. A picture of a steaming black mug sat below the text. I stared at it. A cold prickle moved up my spine. Fucking phone's listening, I muttered to the empty room. I swiped past it. But the image of the mug was burned onto the back of my eyes. I closed them. It was still there. Forget coffee. I needed noise. Something to fill the space. Hey, Lexi, I called out to the smart speaker on the bookshelf. Play my late-night work playlist. The blue ring on the device lit up. But the familiar indie rock didn't start. Instead, a piano began to play. A single, slow melody. It wasn't sad. It was something deeper. Mournful. Like the sound of a memory you can't quite place. Each note hung in the air, heavy and coated in dust. I'd never heard it before in my life. I was sure of it. This wasn't my music. My fingers tightened on my phone. Lexi, stop, I said. My voice was sharp. The music cut out instantly. The silence that rushed back in felt different. Heavier. What the hell? I said, getting up from the sofa. The Arctic expedition was suddenly underway. I walked over to the speaker, picked it up like it was a piece of evidence. Lexi, show me my play history. A list appeared on my phone screen, synced to the device. Spotify, Apple Music, podcast episodes, all the usual stuff. But the top of the list, the most recent entry, was blank. Nothing. It was as if that piano piece had never existed. Must be a glitch, I told myself. A bug in the system. A random track from the ass end of the internet accidentally streamed to my device. It happened. It was a stupid, logical explanation, but it didn't make the feeling in my gut go away. It felt wrong. I sat down at my desk, the glow of the dual monitors pushing back the shadows. I just try to fix Mark's stupid logo. Forget the music, forget the coffee ad. Work, that's what I needed. Focus. My finger was on the mouse, ready to click open the design file, when a small notification popped up in the corner of my screen. An email. That wasn't unusual. But the sender address was. It wasn't a client. It wasn't my mom. It was a string of gibberish. Cyrillic letters and numbers. Vidaliniem Korystuwaciem et Proton. C.H. And the subject line made my blood run cold. Subject. Nice tune. My hand froze over the mouse. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the 2 words on the screen. It was impossible. A coincidence. It had to be a coincidence. Spam bots send weird subject lines all the time, but my heart was a drum against my ribs. Thump. 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 Slowly I moved the cursor and clicked. The email opened. The body was short. Just a few words that ripped the floor out from under me. But so sad, Kevin. You should cheer up. My name. He knew my name. My breath came out in a ragged gasp. I shoved my chair back, the wheels screeching on the hardwood floor. Who? How? The ad, the music, the email. They weren't separate events. They were a sequence. A message. Rage, hot and sharp, cut through the fear. Some fucking troll. Some hacker who got a hold of my data from a breach. I jabbed the reply button. My fingers flew across the keyboard, clumsy and shaking. Who the fuck are you? I hit send. A red error message appeared almost instantly. Delivery failed permanently. Address does not exist. Address does not exist. My own apartment, my sanctuary, from the world, suddenly felt like a glass box. I was on display. And someone was on the other side of the glass, tapping on it, watching. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, a sound I never noticed, was now a loud, intrusive roar. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch and deepen. I was alone. Utterly, completely alone. And that had always been my comfort. Now it was my terror. Then I heard it. It wasn't loud. It was the opposite of loud. A tiny sound. A click. Soft. Metallic. It came from the front door. I went rigid. My head snapped toward the door. Every muscle in my body locked. Was that the lock? The deadbolt? I listened. My ears strained, trying to pull another sound from the air. Nothing. Just the refrigerator hum. Just the frantic beat of my own heart. The silence was absolute. It was a physical presence. A weight. It was worse than a scream. It was the held breath before the scream. Someone had tried my door. I slid off my chair, my socked feet silent on the floor. I moved like a predator or prey. I wasn't sure which. My back pressed against the cool wall as I crept toward the entryway. Each step was a decision. My world had shrunk to the 10 feet between my desk and the front door. My hand was shaking as I reached for the peephole cover. I flipped the small metal disc up. The sound it made, a tiny snick, was a thunderclap in the quiet. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened it, pressing my face against the cold wood of the door. I looked through the lens. The hallway was empty. The cheap fluorescent light overhead cast a sick, yellow glow on the scuffed linoleum floor. The door to my neighbor's apartment, 4B, was closed. The fire extinguisher was in its case on the wall. Everything was exactly as it should be. Terribly, horribly normal. There was no one there. But the click had been real. I knew it. It wasn't the building settling. It wasn't the wind. It was the sound of a tool, a pick or a key, sliding into my lock and failing. A quiet attempt. A test. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. He was out there. Or he had been, a second ago. He was quiet. He was patient. He knew my name. He knew my music. And now, he was at my door. My breath hitched. I backed away from the door slowly, one step at a time, my eyes still locked on it, as if it might burst open. I needed proof. I needed to see that email again. I needed to know I wasn't going crazy. That the gibberish address and my name and the mention of the song were real. I spun around and rushed back to my desk, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my teeth. My apartment felt huge and exposed now, a stage with too many dark corners. I sat down, my hand gripping the mouse. I clicked on my inbox. I scrolled to the top, where the email from the phantom address had been. It wasn't there. What? The word was a dry whisper. My eyes scanned the list again. And again. Nothing. It was gone. No! I clicked on my trash folder. Empty. My spam folder. Just ads for pills I didn't need. I typed the subject line, "Nice tune," into the search bar. No results found. It was gone. Completely. As if it had never been sent. As if it had never existed. It had been there. I saw it. I read it. I replied to it. The screen in front of me seemed to mock me with its clean, orderly inbox. My own computer was lying to me. A thought, cold and slick as ice, slid into my mind. A question that felt more dangerous than any intruder. What if I had imagined it? What if the stress, the isolation, the goddamn grayness of it all had finally cracked something in my head? The ad, a coincidence. The music, a glitch. And the email, a phantom. A creation of a tired, broken mind. I stared at my own reflection in the dark monitor. My face was pale, my eyes wide. I didn't recognize the person looking back at me. I looked terrified, and I didn't know if I was terrified of the man who was trying to get into my apartment or of the man who was already inside my head. Sunlight. That's what I needed. Raw, unfiltered sunlight. I yanked the cheap gray curtains aside, and the morning light flooded the room, harsh and unforgiving. It exposed the dust motes dancing in the air, the faint coffee ring on the side table, the general disarray of my life. Good normalcy. I would force it to be normal. Last night was a stress-induced fever dream. That's what I told myself as I measured out the coffee beans. The good stuff. The real stuff. The music was a server glitch on Lexi's end. The email was a sophisticated spam bot that spoofed my name and then erased itself. The click at the door was the old building's pipes groaning. It was all a series of unfortunate, unconnected coincidences. A bad trip without the drugs. My mind was just tired. Burnt out from Mark and his logo that needed to pop. I repeated the logical explanations over and over, a mantra against the lingering dread that clung to the corners of the room. Get a grip, Kevin. You're not crazy, you're just exhausted. The grinder whirred. A loud, obnoxious, wonderful sound that drowned out the quiet. The coffee machine hissed and gurgled. These were the sounds of a normal Tuesday morning. I poured the steaming black liquid into a mug, wrapping my hands around its warmth. The fear from last night was a ghost, and ghosts couldn't stand the light of day. I took a deep, steadying breath. See? Fine. Everything was fine. I carried my mug over to my workstation. Time to face the music. Time to make Mark's dog food logo pop. I sat down, the worn leather of my chair complaining under my weight. I took a sip of coffee. It was hot, bitter, and real. I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to ease. It was just a bad night. I woke the computer from its sleep. The dual monitors flickered to life, their glow pushing back against the morning sun, and my heart stopped. The coffee mug slipped in my hand, hot liquid sloshing over my fingers. I barely felt the burn. I couldn't feel anything except a sudden, hollowing cold that started in my stomach and spread through my entire body. My wallpaper was gone. My carefully crafted, abstract blue and gray design, a piece of my own art that had been my desktop background for 3 years, was gone. In its place was a photograph. A simple, well-lit, high-resolution photograph. It was a picture of my own front door, taken from the hallway. I couldn't breathe. My lungs seized. I stared, my eyes tracing every detail of the image on my screen. The scratched, dark brown paint of the door, the tarnished brass of the number plate. 4A. My doormat, with the faded welcome that was more of an insult than an invitation. It was my door, there was no doubt. The angle was low, as if taken by someone crouching. But it wasn't the door that made the blood drain from my face. It was the package. Sitting on the doormat, propped against the door, was a flat brown cardboard box. The Amazon Prime logo was clearly visible. It was the new drawing tablet I had ordered, the one that was delivered this morning, the one I had picked up not even 20 minutes ago. The box was still on my kitchen counter. I could see it from my desk. This picture was taken today. A few minutes ago, while I was making coffee, while I was telling myself it was all in my head. He had been out there, right there, crouching in the piss-yellow light of the hallway, taking a picture of my door. My hand started to shake. I slammed the mug down on the desk. The logical explanations shattered. The mantra of normalcy evaporated. This was not a glitch. This was not a coincidence. This was real. This was happening. Who? How? My mind raced, a frantic scramble for an answer that wasn't there. There was no one in the hall when I got the package. I would have seen them. The hallway is a straight line. There's nowhere to hide except a stairwell at the far end. He must have been in my neighbor's doorway, 4B, old Mrs. Gable's place. She was deaf as a post. She wouldn't have heard a thing. The image on my screen wasn't just a picture. It was a message. A declaration. I was right here. You didn't even know. The rage from the night before came back, hot and useless, warring with a wave of pure terror that made my skin feel cold and tight. Some sick fuck was playing games with me. My phone vibrated on the desk. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. I jumped so violently that my chair skidded back a few inches. My gaze snapped from the monitor to the small black rectangle. It was lying face down. The vibration stopped. It was probably a news alert. Or an email from Mark. I reached for it, my hand trembling so badly I could barely control my fingers. I flipped it over. A text message. From a number I didn't recognize. A string of digits with no name attached. I read the words. Nice door color. But you should use the deadbolt. The air left my body in a wheezing gasp. I shot up from my chair, my eyes darting to my front door across the apartment. The deadbolt. Last night, after the click, after looking through the peephole, had I? I couldn't remember. In my panicked state, had I forgotten? I stumbled toward the door, my socked feet slipping on the hardwood. My body moved on pure instinct. I reached the door, my hand shaking as I touched the lock. My fingers found the thumb turn for the regular lock, the one tied to the doorknob. It was locked. But then my fingers slid up, to the deadbolt, the separate, heavy, secure deadbolt. The thumb turn was vertical. Unlocked. He was right. I hadn't locked it. He knew. He was watching me. He was watching me right now. How? From where? Through the window? I lived on the 4th floor. There was no fire escape on this side of the building. Through the peephole? He would have to be standing right there. I crept back to the door, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, and slid the peephole cover aside. The hallway was empty. Sickly yellow light, scuffed floor. Nothing. I took a breath. My hand, slick with sweat, gripped the cold metal of the deadbolt. I had to lock it. I had to do something. K-chunk. The sound of the heavy bolt sliding into its housing was deafening. It was the sound of a cage door slamming shut. It was the sound of finality, a solid 1-inch piece of steel between me and him. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, my eyes squeezed shut. Safe. For a second, just 1 second, I felt safe. P-I-N-G. I knew the sound before it even registered. My phone. My pocket. The vibration was a jolt of electricity against my leg. I knew what it would be. I knew it, but I still had to look. My hand felt alien as I pulled the phone out. The screen was already lit up. A new message from the same number. Better. That's all it said. Better. The floor dropped out from under me. He was seeing this. He was watching this unfold in real time. The lock. The deadbolt. Me. It wasn't through the window. It wasn't through the peephole. A thought, so insane it had to be true, exploded in my mind. He was inside the walls. A camera. A tiny pinhole camera hidden in the smoke detector, in the light fixture, somewhere. He had turned my home, my one safe space, into his own personal television show. The fear turned into something else. Something white-hot and blinding. Rage. Pure, animal rage. I wasn't prey. I wouldn't be his toy. I wouldn't cower in my own home while some psycho watched me on a monitor. Fuck him. I didn't think. I acted. In one fluid motion, I unlocked the deadbolt K-chunk and wrenched the door open so hard it slammed against the inside wall. I launched myself into the hallway, my voice tearing from my throat, raw and broken. WHO, the fuck are you? Show yourself, you coward! My shout echoed in the narrow space. My eyes scanned wildly. Left. Right. Nothing. Then, at the far end of the hall, I saw it. Movement. A flash of black. A figure in a dark hoodie, just their back visible, turning the corner into the concrete stairwell. They didn't run. They just walked. A casual turn, like they were just heading downstairs. Then they were gone. The hallway was empty again. The silence that rushed back was more profound than before. My own ragged breathing was loud in my ears. I stood there for a long moment, chest heaving, the adrenaline turning my blood to fire. He was real. A real person. Not a ghost in the machine. A man in a black hoodie. I had seen him. I had scared him off. A small, triumphant feeling sparked in my chest. I backed into my apartment, my eyes still fixed on the stairwell down the hall. I slammed the door shut, the sound booming through my apartment. I immediately twisted the deadbolt, K-chunk. Then I fumbled with the chain lock, sliding the metal pin into its track. Then, for good measure, I dragged my heaviest armchair over and wedged its back under the doorknob. There, let him try now. I stood there, panting, my back against the door, my fortress. I had defended it. My heart was still trying to beat its way out of my chest, but the suffocating terror was gone, replaced by the shaky aftermath of rage. I was alive. I was okay. My eyes slowly adjusted from the dim hallway light to the sunlit room. And then I saw it, and the world tilted on its axis. On the polished hardwood floor, just a few feet from the door, right in the middle of a sunbeam, a footprint. It wasn't mine. My feet were bare. This was the print of a heavy boot. The tread was deep, clogged with dark, wet mud and bits of dead leaves. It was starkly out of place on my clean floor. It was a violation, an ugly smear on my life. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. It wasn't the mud, it wasn't the tread. It was that the footprint was not there when I ran out into the hall. I would have seen it. I would have stepped in it. I knew it. With a certainty that defied all logic, I knew that floor had been cleaned seconds ago. The door had been locked, chained now, barricaded. The figure was in the hallway. I had just seen him disappear down the stairs. He was outside. I was inside. So how? Napa. How did he get inside my apartment to leave a single wet footprint while I was screaming at him in the hall? The question was no longer how. The question was, what the fuck do I do now? The logical part of my brain, the small, screaming part that was rapidly losing the argument, kept insisting it was impossible. No one can get through a locked, chained, and barricaded door to leave a single muddy footprint and then vanish into the hallway they were never in. It was a break in the laws of physics. But the print had been real. I'd wiped it up with a paper towel, the damp grit a dark stain against the white. The paper towel was now wadded up in the trash can under the sink, a sacrament to my own insanity. Hours bled into one another. The triumphant afternoon sun became a tired orange glow, then died completely. The city outside my fourth-floor window lit up, a million indifferent eyes staring back at me. I didn't turn on a single lamp. Darkness was a blanket. It felt safer. Hiding was safer. I sat on the couch, my back pressed into the corner, knees drawn up to my chest. In my right hand, I held the 8-inch chef's knife from the block in the kitchen. The steel was cold and heavy. I felt like an idiot, a paranoid character in a bad movie, but the solid wood of the armchair was still jammed under the doorknob. The chain was still on, the deadbolt was still thrown, the fortress was secure. So why did I feel like the walls were made of paper? Every creak of the old building was a footstep. Every sigh of the wind was a whisper. My own breathing was too loud. The lamp on the end table flickered. My head snapped towards it. It flickered again, a frantic little spasm of light before a quiet pop echoed in the room. It went dark. Just a dead bulb. That's all. It happens. Then the over-the-sink light in the kitchen, its glow, a dirty yellow rectangle visible from my seat, did the exact same thing. A flicker. Another. Pop darkness. My breath caught in my throat. I lowered the knife slightly, my knuckles white. This wasn't a coincidence. My grip on the handle tightened until my fingers ached. Then the faint light spilling from my bedroom doorway vanished. Pop. The apartment was now submerged in a deep, oppressive gray. The only light was the distant, chemical orange of the city skyline filtering through the glass. The silence it left behind was huge. It had weight. I scrambled off the couch, my bare feet silent on the hardwood. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I had to see. I crept to the door, my body low, and pressed my eye to the peephole. The fisheye lens showed the hallway, distorted and empty. The overhead light was still on. A steady, sickly yellow. It wasn't the building's power. It was just me. He was in the wires. He was in the walls. He was cutting the lights, one by one, taking away my sight. A sound. From the kitchen. It was quiet, but it sliced through the silence like a razor. A dry, scraping squeal. Metal on wood. A long, drawn-out sound, full of intention. My blood turned to ice water. I knew that sound. I heard it every single day. It was the cutlery drawer, the one next to the sink, the one with the knife block sitting right beside it. It was opening, slowly, deliberately. He was inside. The footprint wasn't a warning. It was an announcement. He wasn't in the hallway. He wasn't in the walls. He was here. He had been here the whole time, hiding, waiting for the dark. My own knife felt useless, the biggest one in the set. What was in that drawer? 5 steak knives, a boning knife, a small, sharp paring knife. He was in my kitchen. He was looking for a weapon, and I had already given him a full selection. My brain was a storm of pure, white noise. Run! Hide! Fight! The words were meaningless. Run where? The front door was a death trap. He was between me and it. Fight what? A shadow in the dark? Hide! It was the only option left. I didn't think. I just moved. A desperate, silent scramble away from the living room, away from the kitchen. I flew into the bedroom, the darkness in here even more complete. The closet. It was my only chance, my only hope. I fumbled for the knob, my hand shaking so badly it took 2 tries to get a grip. I slipped inside, pulling the louvered door until it was almost shut. Not all the way. I left a crack, a tiny vertical sliver of gray light, just enough to see a slice of the room. My heart was a jackhammer. I was going to have a heart attack. I was going to die right here in a pile of my own dirty laundry. I shoved my free hand against my mouth, biting down on my knuckles to stifle the sound of my own ragged gasps for air. Footsteps. They came from the living room. Slow. Heavy. The sound I'd heard in my mind all day now made real. The tread of a heavy boot on the hardwood floor. It wasn't the sound of someone sneaking. It was the sound of someone who owned the place. They stopped. Then turned. Now they were coming toward the bedroom. He was in the room with me. The sliver of light from the closet door was suddenly blocked by a hulking shadow. A shape, blacker than the surrounding darkness. He moved without a sound now. He was just a void walking through my room, a soft, rustling sound. Fabric. He was touching my things, the clothes on my chair, the books on my nightstand. Then the footsteps stopped. Right in front of the closet door. Silence. My lungs burned. My eyes, wide and unblinking, were locked on the crack in the door. I could see nothing but the solid black of his form, inches away from my face. He wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. Or maybe he was, and I just couldn't hear it over the blood pounding in my ears. He knows. He has to know. He knows I'm in here. This isn't a search. This is a game. He's standing there, listening. Can he hear my heart? Can he smell my fear? A drop of sweat traced a cold path down my temple, and I was convinced the sound of it hitting my collar would be a gunshot in the silence. Please move. Just move. Do something. Anything. The silence stretched on, becoming a physical thing, pressing in on me, crushing the air from my lungs. The knife in my hand was a child's toy. The closet door felt as thin as tissue paper. I was in a cardboard box, and he was standing right outside with a match. Then he moved. Not toward me, away. The shadow shifted from the crack in the door. The footsteps resumed their slow, heavy patrol, walking out of the bedroom. I stayed frozen, my fists still crammed in my mouth. I listened to his boots on the hardwood as he moved back into the living room. Then came a series of sounds from near the front door. The dull scrape of my heavy armchair being dragged across the floor. The metallic rattle of the chain lock being slid from its track. K-chunk. The unmistakable, solid sound of the deadbolt being unlocked. A pause. Then the faint squeak of a hinge, and the soft click of the front door closing. Silence. I didn't move. I counted seconds that felt like hours. Was it a trick? Was he standing right outside the closet, waiting for me to emerge? I listened. I heard nothing. The distant wail of a siren from the street below, the hum of the refrigerator kicking on in the kitchen. Normal sounds. For how long did I stand there? A minute? 10? When I finally took my hand from my mouth, the indentations of my teeth were still white on my knuckles. My muscles screamed in protest as I slowly, carefully, pushed the closet door open. The bedroom was empty. The sliver of moonlight from the window cast long shadows across the floor. My heart was still a runaway train, but the immediate threat was gone. I crept out, holding the chef's knife in front of me like a shield. I moved down the short hallway, my eyes scanning every dark corner. The living room was empty. The armchair was pushed to the side, the front door was closed. I looked through the peephole. The ugly yellow hallway was empty. He was gone. My whole body trembled with the adrenaline crash. I was alive. I was okay. I turned back to the apartment, my eyes slowly adjusting. I needed light. I needed to see. I flicked the switch by the door. Nothing. Right. He'd cut the power. My gaze fell upon the kitchen. And I saw it. The knife block was still on the counter, right where I always kept it. But it was empty. Every single slot. The steak knives, the boning knife, the bread knife, all of them. Gone. He had taken them. But he hadn't opened the drawer. He had made me think he was looking for a weapon, but he had already taken them. The sound was a diversion. To send me running. To make me hide. My eyes scanned the counter. And then I saw the last piece. The framed photograph from my desk. The one of me, smiling, arms around my mom and dad at the lake house 10 years ago. Before the divorce. Before everything. It wasn't on my desk anymore. It was lying flat on the kitchen counter. Right in the middle. Placed there with perfect care. And resting on top of it, also placed with a chilling precision, was the one knife he'd left behind. The small, 3-inch paring knife. Its blade was clean, gleaming faintly in the half-light from the window. Its sharp tip was pressed directly into the center of my smiling face in the photograph. The paring knife was a monument to the last 12 hours. I hadn't moved it. I hadn't touched the photograph. I had just sat on the floor of the living room, my back against the couch, the big chef's knife still in my hand, and watched the sun come up. The gray of pre-dawn slowly turned to a weak, watery blue. The city outside came to life with the distant sounds of traffic and sirens, but inside my apartment, it was a tomb. My tomb. The picture on the counter was an accusation. The knife in its heart was the signature. He hadn't just been here. He had curated the experience. He had directed my fear. The empty knife block was a theatrical flourish. The photo was the punchline. My hand trembled as I finally got to my feet. My joints screamed. I needed a voice. I needed another human being to know. If I died, I didn't want to be a mystery. I wanted them to know I wasn't crazy. I found my phone on the floor where I'd dropped it. The screen was cracked. I didn't care. I fumbled through my contacts, my thumb slick with sweat, and found the number for building management. It went to a call center. Of course it did. An automated woman with a dead voice asked me to press 1 for maintenance. I did. The phone rang. 4 times. 5. On the 6th, a man answered, his voice thick with sleep and annoyance. Yeah? My name is Kyle. I'm in apartment 4B, I said. My own voice was a dry rasp. A stranger's voice. There was a break-in last night. Someone was in my apartment. A long, suffering sigh crackled over the line. Sir, did you call the police? No. He left. The door is locked. There's no sign of forced entry, but he was here. He was inside my apartment. The words sounded insane even as I said them. So nothing was stolen? He took my kitchen knives. All of them. I left out the part about the photo. It was too personal. Too crazy. Look, you have a camera in the 4th floor hallway, right? I need you to check the footage. From last night. Please. Sometime after 10. We don't just hand out security footage, sir. That's for official police requests. I'm not asking you to hand it out. My voice cracked, rising in pitch. I'm asking you to look. Just look. See if anyone was at my door. Another sigh. The sound of a man who dealt with psychos and complainers all day. I was just another one. Look. Kyle in 4B. I'll have the on-site guy, Frank. Take a look when he gets a minute. He'll call you if he sees anything. Okay? He hung up before I could answer. The dial tone buzzed in my ear. I felt a profound, chilling despair wash over me. The small, screaming part of my brain from yesterday was back. It was telling me I was alone. Utterly, completely alone. No one was coming to help. No one believed me. This was my problem. Just mine. I spent the next hour pacing. From the living room to the bedroom. I avoided the kitchen. I couldn't look at the picture. Every sound from the hallway was a new threat. The elevator dinged. Footsteps. They went past my door. My body was a tightly coiled spring. The chef's knife was still in my hand. I felt like a fool holding it, but I couldn't put it down. It was part of me now. My phone rang. An unknown number. My heart leaped into my throat. I swiped to answer. Yeah, is this Kyle? It was a different voice. Older, bored. Yes, this is Kyle. This is Frank, security. Got a message you were worried about a break-in. Did you check the camera? I asked, my voice tight. Last night, after 10? Yeah, I just scrubbed through it. Couple of your neighbors came home from work. That's it. No one loitering. No one at your door. Clean as a whistle. His tone was dismissive. He'd already decided I was a waste of his time. That's not possible, I whispered. He was here. I heard him. Look, pal, Frank said, his voice losing its last shred of professionalism. This old building makes noises. The pipes bang. The wind howls. You work from home, right? Stare at the same 4 walls all day, you start seeing things. Get some fresh air. You're fine. The line went dead. I stood in the middle of my living room, the phone in my hand, and felt the floor drop out from under me. No one believes you. The feeling was so strong it was like a physical presence in the room. He had been right. He knew this would happen. He knew they would brush me off. This was part of the game. He wasn't just terrorizing me, he was isolating me, cutting me off from the rest of the world and leaving me to rot in my own fear. I had to get out. I couldn't stay here. My laptop was on the coffee table. I flipped it open, my mind racing. I could book a hotel, get an Uber, be gone in 20 minutes, just leave it all behind. The laptop whirred to life. The screen glowed. Ding! A notification, an email. It was from an address that was just a random string of numbers and letters. The subject line was blank. My mouse hovered over it. Don't open it. Just shut the laptop. Just run. But I couldn't. I had to know. I clicked. There was no text. Just a single attachment. A video file. _hallway_cam 04.mp4. My blood went cold. Slowly, as if in a trance, I double-clicked the file. A video player window popped open. It was him. It was Frank. He had sent me the footage. Maybe he felt bad. Maybe he saw something after all. The video started. The timestamp in the corner read 10:13 p.m. It was the grainy, distorted fisheye view of my hallway. My door was on the left. The elevator was down the hall on the right. For a full minute, nothing happened. Then a figure stepped out of the stairwell door, a person in a dark hoodie and jeans. Their face was completely hidden in shadows. They stood there, motionless. My breath caught in my chest. There. See? I wasn't crazy. The figure took a step toward my door. Then, another. This was it. This was the moment. This was the proof I needed. I watched, my heart hammering, as the figure raised a hand. The video dissolved into a chaos of green and gray static. A loud hiss erupted from the laptop speakers. It lasted for maybe 5 seconds. 5 seconds of pure digital noise. And then the picture snapped back into focus. The hallway was empty. The figure was gone. The timestamp had jumped forward by 30 seconds. The video played on for another minute, showing nothing but an empty hall. Then it ended. I stared at the black screen of the video player, my own terrified face reflected back at me. It was a lie. He had manipulated the feed. He had cut out the part where he came inside. He made himself disappear. He made it look like nothing happened. Ding! Another email from the same sender. I clicked it open. There were only 5 words, all in capital letters, spread across the screen. See? Haba! No one believes you. A scream built in my throat, a raw, animal sound of pure terror. He was watching me. He was in my email. He was in the goddamn walls. The constriction I felt was physical. The air in the apartment was thick and heavy, impossible to breathe. The walls were moving in. That was it. I was done. I wasn't going to sit here and wait for him to come back. Flight. The only instinct left. I scrambled into the bedroom, yanking my backpack from the floor. I didn't think about what I needed. I just started shoving things in. A change of clothes from the laundry pile. My laptop. The charger. My wallet. My keys. My hand was shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice. The clatter on the hardwood floor was like a gunshot. I grabbed the chef's knife from the bed and shoved it into the side pocket of the backpack. I slung the bag over my shoulder. It felt heavy. Final. I ran to the front door. I didn't care about the armchair I'd wedged under the knob last night. I kicked it aside. My hand reached for the deadbolt. My fingers brushed the cool metal of the lock. I was inches from freedom. Boom. The door exploded inward, slamming against my hand. Pain, white-hot and blinding, shot up my arm. I yelled, stumbling back, cradling my crushed fingers. The door frame shuddered. Boom. Another impact, harder this time. The sound wasn't a knock, it was a battering ram. It was pure, brute force. The deadbolt held, but the wood around it splintered. A small crack appeared near the lock. Boom! He was trying to break the door down. He wasn't picking the lock. He wasn't being quiet. The game was over. I was a cornered animal, and he was the hunter, done with the chase. I backed away, my whole body trembling. My eyes were glued to the door as it bucked and shuddered with each impact. He was just on the other side. A few inches of wood and metal separated us. Boom! 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 The rhythm was merciless, inhumanly steady. There was no rage in it, just purpose. The sound echoed in the small apartment, in my skull, in my bones. I looked around wildly. There was nowhere to run. The window? I was on the 4th floor. The kitchen? He had all the knives. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence that followed was immense. Deafening. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears, and my own ragged, panicked breathing. I stood, frozen in the middle of the room, waiting. My eyes were locked on the door. Was he listening? Had he given up? Was it a trick? Zeige, Hawaiian. Minutes stretched into an eternity. I didn't move a muscle. I just stared at the splintered door. Slowly, cautiously, I crept forward. The fear was a physical thing, a hand pressing on my chest, but the need to know was stronger. I had to see. I had to know what was out there. I put my eye to the peephole. Black. Total, absolute black. My mind didn't understand at first. Was the hallway light out? No, Frank said it was on. I pulled my head back, confused. I looked again. Nothing. A void. It was then that I saw it. A faint texture to the blackness. The unmistakable sheen of electrical tape. A piece of thick black tape had been plastered over the peephole from the outside, and scrawled on it, in what looked like thick, red marker, were two words. A command. A promise. Stay put. My mind was a blank slate of white noise. The words on the tape weren't just a threat. They were a verdict. Stay put. A command. A cage built from two words scrawled in marker. The animal part of my brain, the part that had been screaming to run, fell silent. It was replaced by a cold, sharp point of focus. Proof. I needed proof. If I died in this apartment, I wouldn't be the crazy guy Frank the security guard talked about. I would be a victim. My hand shook as I fumbled for my phone in my backpack. The screen was a spiderweb of cracks from when I dropped it, but it still glowed. My thumb, slick with sweat, found the camera app. I raised the phone, my whole arm trembling, and centered the peephole in the frame. The black tape. The angry red letters. The flash went off, a brilliant white burst that reflected off the textured surface of the tape for a fraction of a second. The click of the shutter sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. I took another. And another. 3 photos. Undeniable. I lowered the phone, my breathing ragged. I had him. It was small. It was just a piece of tape. But it was real. It was something I could show the cops. Something that proved this wasn't just the wind or bad pipes or my own mind turning on me. I stared at the door, at the tape. He was out there. He had stood right there, just inches from me, and left his mark. My throat was dust. I needed water. My body was running on pure adrenaline, and the crash was coming. I backed away from the door, my eyes never leaving it, and sidestepped into the kitchen. The photo on the counter, the one with the knife through its heart, was still there. I ignored it. I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, my fingers so clumsy I almost dropped it. The cap fought me, the plastic crinkling loudly in the quiet. I finally twisted it off and drank, letting the cool liquid course down my raw throat. It was the first normal thing I had done in hours, the simple act of drinking water. It took maybe 10 seconds, 15 at most. I walked back into the living room, bottle in hand, ready to plan my next move. Maybe I could call 911 again. This time I had a photo. This time they had to listen. I looked at the door, and my blood froze. The tape was gone. The peephole was a clean, brass circle again, glinting in the weak morning light filtering through the window. There was no residue, no torn edges, no sign it had ever been there. My mind refused to process it. I blinked. Once. Twice. It was still gone. No, I whispered. My voice was a dry croak. No, 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 no. I rushed to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I undid the deadbolt. The click echoed in the hallway. I pulled the door open a crack. The hallway was empty. Just the beige walls, the drab carpet, and the faint hum of the building's ventilation. No discarded tape on the floor, nothing. He was fast. Impossibly fast. But it didn't matter. I had the photo. I snatched up my phone from the floor, my thumb flying to the photo gallery. My breath caught in my chest. I tapped the icon. The gallery opened, showing the thumbnails, the last 3 pictures. My stomach dropped. They were blurs. Not the tape, not the door. Just hazy, indistinct blurs of light and shadow, as if I'd been waving the phone around wildly when I took them. Useless. They proved nothing. No. Wait. I squinted at the screen. It wasn't a blur. I zoomed in on the most recent one. It was a perfectly focused, well-lit shot of my peephole. Clean, uncovered, the way it looked right now. My whole body went cold. It wasn't possible. He hadn't just removed the tape. He'd reached into my phone. He had changed the picture. Or I never took it. Did I imagine it? Did I hallucinate the tape? The red marker? The words? My mind was scrambling, trying to find a foothold in a reality that was turning to sand beneath my feet. The phone rang in my hand, vibrating so violently I almost dropped it again. The screen lit up. Mom. A wave of relief so powerful it made my knees weak washed over me. A real person. A voice I knew. I swiped to answer, my finger leaving a sweaty streak across the glass. "Mom?" I choked out. "Kyle? Oh, thank God. Are you okay?" Her voice was tight, strained, not her usual calm tone. She sounded scared. "No, Mom, I'm not okay," I said, the words spilling out in a rush. "There's someone here. In the building. He's been terrorizing me all night. He was just at my door. Mom, you have to call the police for me. I don't think they believe me." There was a pause on the other end, not the pause of shock. It was a knowing, hesitant pause. "Kyle, honey, I just got a call." "A call? From who?" "From you," she said, her voice dropping. "Well, from your number." "A man. He said you were having a bit of an episode, that you were under a lot of stress." The floor tilted beneath my feet. "What? No, Mom, that wasn't me. That was him. He's messing with you. He's trying to make me sound crazy." "He said you might say things like that," she said, and I could hear the pity in her voice. It was 1,000 times worse than disbelief. It was the sound of a parent placating a child they think has lost their mind. "He said you were feeling paranoid and that I shouldn't worry, that you'd be okay." "Mom, listen to me," I shouted, my voice cracking. "He sent me a video. He hacked the security cameras. He tried to break my door down. This is real." "Kyle, honey, breathe," she said, her voice dripping with that gentle, infuriating condescension. "Just breathe. Why don't you try to get some sleep? Maybe you just need to rest." "Did you take your medication?" The line clicked. Silence. She hung up. She didn't believe me. He had gotten to her first. He had poisoned the well. He had cut the last rope connecting me to the world. I was on an island, and he was the only other inhabitant. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dead air. I was alone. He had won. This was his game, and he had won. A soft chime came from the bedroom, my smart speaker. I'd forgotten it was even plugged in. Then a voice filled the apartment, a voice made of static and digital artifacts, but one I recognized instantly. It was mine. "Your." The word was drawn out glitchy, a recording, chopped up and stitched back together. "Going." My blood turned to ice. He was in my living room in my phone, and now he was in the speaker in my bedroom. He was everywhere. Crazy! A scream tore out of my throat, a raw, ragged sound that had nothing human in it. It was the sound of a wire snapping, the sound of a mind breaking. I wasn't fighting an intruder anymore. I was fighting a ghost in the machine, a ghost who wore my face and used my voice. I threw the phone. It hit the wall with a sickening crunch of plastic and glass, skittering to the floor in a shower of fragments. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, and fell into the corner of the room. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, my hands clutching my head, pulling at my own hair. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe Frank the security guy was right. Maybe Mom was right. There was no he. There was only me. My overworked, isolated, unraveling mind creating a monster to explain the bangs and the creaks of an old building. The loneliness finally eating me alive from the inside out. I rocked back and forth, muttering to myself, a low, desperate chant of no, 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 no. The apartment was silent again, but the silence was different now. It was judging me. My eyes fell on the wreckage of my phone. The screen was dark, a shattered ruin, but as I watched, a flicker of light appeared, then another. The backlight, broken but not dead, was trying to turn on. Through the spiderweb of cracks, a single notification box was visible. A text message. From an unknown number, the letters were fractured, bisected by black lines, but I could still read them. Your mom is worried about you. The pieces of my phone on the floor were a monument to my broken mind. The silence that followed my scream was worse than any noise. It was a heavy thing, a physical weight pressing down. He had taken my voice, my photos, my mother. He had left me with nothing but the four walls of this apartment and the shattered proof of my own sanity. I sat in the corner, knees to my chest, for a long time. The weak morning light crawled across the floor, painting a line that seemed to separate me from the rest of the room. The world outside that line was his. The world inside was mine, a shrinking scrap of territory. No, a new thought cut through the fog. Cold and hard. Not a thought of fear, but of anger, a low, burning ember in the ash of my panic. I was not going to die like this. I was not going to sit in the corner and wait for him to decide what came next. If this was a game, I was done playing defense. I pushed myself up. My legs were numb. My movements were stiff, robotic. I walked to the wreckage of my phone and stared down at it. A tool, now useless. He used technology. He used phones, speakers, cameras. He hid behind a screen. What if I took the screen away? Reese, check? An idea sparked. A desperate, stupid, terrible idea. It was the only one I had. I couldn't call for help. I couldn't prove what was happening. I couldn't wait. So I had to act. I had to change the board. I had to flush him out. I would become the bait. I stood in the middle of the living room. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the stale air. I forced my voice to sound casual, annoyed. I spoke to the empty room. "Okay, fine," I said, loud enough to be heard through a door, through the floor, through a listening device. "I'll come over. Just give me 5 minutes." Silence answered me. I imagined him, wherever he was, listening, a smile spreading across his unseen face. I continued the one-sided conversation. "No, I'm not waiting. I have to get out of this place for a bit. I'm leaving now." I walked with purpose. I grabbed my backpack from the floor, slinging it over my shoulder. I walked to the closet and pulled out my jacket. The zipper made a loud, rasping sound as I pulled it up. Each sound was a word. Getting ready. I went to the small bowl by the door where one kept my keys and wallet. I picked them up, letting the keys jangle loudly in my hand. Leaving, now. My heart was a fist hammering against my ribs. My skin was cold. This was either the smartest thing I'd ever done or the last. There was no in-between. I walked to the door. My hand, slick with sweat, hesitated over the deadbolt. This was the point of no return. Once I opened this door, I was on his territory. I twisted the lock. The thunk was a starting pistol. I turned the knob. I pulled the door open, stepped out into the hallway, and pulled it shut behind me. The latch clicked into place. I was out. The hallway was the same as it always was. Drab carpet. Beige walls. The low hum of the building. I didn't look toward the elevators. I didn't look toward the end of the hall. I took 3 loud, deliberate steps away from my door, my boots thudding on the thin carpet. Then I stopped and pivoted. Instead of walking to the elevator bay, I lunged for the stairwell door, just 10 feet away. It was heavy, metal, painted the same ugly beige as the walls. I pulled it open just enough to slip through, my backpack scraping against the frame. I let it close without a sound, the hydraulic arm easing it shut with a soft hiss and a final gentle snick. Darkness, and the smell of cold concrete and dust. I was in the stairwell. I pressed myself against the wall, my back flat against the cool, painted cinder blocks. The door had a small, wire-meshed glass window at eye level. By pressing my face close, I could see a narrow slice of the hallway I had just left. I could see the door to my apartment. Now I waited. My breathing was loud in my ears. I forced myself to slow it down, taking shallow sips of air. My entire plan depended on him believing I was gone. It depended on him being arrogant, on him thinking he had broken me so completely that I would just run. 1 minute passed. The building hummed. My ears strained, trying to separate the normal sounds from the sound I was listening for. The ding of the elevator. The sound of footsteps. 2 minutes. Nothing. Just the hum. My muscles started to ache from the tension. A drop of sweat traced a line from my temple down my cheek. Had I been wrong? Was he not watching? Was this whole thing just a stupid stunt that proved nothing? 5 minutes. My hope began to curdle into the familiar taste of dread. He wasn't coming. I had imagined it all. The tape. The video. The voice. My mother's call. It was all me. I was the ghost in my own machine. I stood in a dark stairwell, hiding from myself. The thought made a laugh bubble up in my chest, a hysterical, broken sound I had to choke back down. 10 minutes. It was over. The plan was a failure. He wasn't here. He was probably miles away, laughing. Or maybe he never existed at all. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, so profound it made my knees want to buckle. I should just go back inside my apartment, lock the door, pull the blinds, and wait for whatever came next. I was about to push off the wall. I was about to give up. And then I saw it. A shadow. It moved across the far end of the narrow viewing pane. It didn't come from the elevator bay. It came from the other direction, from the stairwell door at the opposite end of the hall. The one that led up. My breath caught in my throat. A figure stepped into my line of sight. He wore a dark hoodie, the hood pulled low over his face. He wore jeans and dark sneakers. He moved with a quiet confidence, not sneaking, but not drawing attention either. He just belonged. He walked down the hall and stopped directly in front of my apartment door. My apartment. Number 4B. He stood there for a moment, perfectly still, as if listening. He was facing away from me. I could only see his back, the dark fabric of the hoodie. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. He was real. Holy God, he was real. I wasn't crazy. Then he moved. His hand went into his pocket. I expected a lockpick, a crowbar, something to force the door. But that's not what he pulled out. It was a set of keys. They glinted under the cheap hallway light. A small, familiar jingle reached my ears, impossibly loud in the quiet. It was a sound I had only ever heard from my own hand. He had my keys. No, not my keys. He had a set of keys. A copy? How? When? My mind raced, trying to find an explanation. The landlord? A maintenance guy? But this man didn't move like a worker. He moved like a predator. My plan had worked. I had flushed him out. He was right there. Exposed. I just needed to wait for him to go inside. Then I could run. I could get out of the building, find a cop, anyone. I had him. He selected a key. He raised his hand to the lock on my door. I could see the brass glinting on the key. My own key. He slid it into the lock. It went in smoothly. A perfect fit. He didn't turn it. He just stood there. His hand resting on the key, his head tilted slightly, as if he was savoring the moment. The absolute violation of it. He could enter whenever he wanted. He didn't need to break anything. He had a key. This wasn't his first time. This house wasn't my home. It was just a place he could access. The silence stretched. A minute. 2. What was he waiting for? Why wasn't he going in? My legs were shaking. I had to bite my lip to keep my teeth from chattering. Then he moved. It wasn't a fast movement. It was slow, measured, deliberate. He turned his head. Not his body. Just his head. It rotated on his neck with a smoothness that wasn't human. It turned past the point of comfort, past the point of looking over his shoulder. It kept turning and turning until his hooded face was aimed directly at the stairwell door. Directly at the small, wire-meshed window. Directly at me. His face was lost in the deep shadow of the hood, a featureless void. But I didn't need to see his eyes. I felt them. A physical pressure. He was looking right at me. He knew. He had known the entire time. The fake phone call. The loud exit. The hiding spot in the stairwell. This wasn't me flushing him out. This was him, leading me into the open. My desperate, clever plan wasn't my plan at all. It was his, and I had walked right into his trap. The air in the stairwell was dead. It didn't move. It just sat there, thick with the smell of old concrete and my own sour sweat. Time stopped. My brain, which had been a screaming engine of panic just moments before, went quiet. It was replaced by a single, cold, crystalline thought that cut through everything. He knew. He wasn't just watching. He was directing. The fake phone call. The loud, clumsy exit. Hiding in this dark, dusty tomb of a stairwell. It wasn't my clever plan. It was his script. I wasn't the hunter. I was the puppet, and my strings had just been pulled taut. Ice in my veins turned to fire. A low, chemical burn of pure rage started in my gut and spread through my chest. The fear was still there. A high-pitched whine in the back of my skull, but the anger was louder. It was a roaring furnace. He was playing with me. He had my mother's voice, my photos, my sanity, and now he was turning my own desperate hope against me. My right hand, slick and shaking, was already deep in my jacket pocket. My fingers closed around the short, heavy piece of metal I'd shoved in there before I left. A leftover piece of rebar from some long-forgotten project, an 8-inch chunk of rusted, solid steel. It was meant to prop open a stubborn window. Now it was the only thing in the world that felt real. My knuckles went white as I gripped it. A weapon. My weapon. He still stood there, a dark shape against the cheap electric light of the hallway. The featureless void of his hood was a black hole aimed right at me. He had a key to my apartment. He had a key to my life. Then he turned away. He slid the key fully into the lock. The tumbler turned with a soft, oiled click. He pushed the door open. My door. The light from my living room spilled out, a pale, sickly yellow rectangle on the hall carpet. He stepped inside. And he left the door open. Just a crack. Maybe a foot wide. It wasn't an oversight. It was an invitation. A dare. A taunt that screamed louder than any voice. Come on, come and get me. This is your home. Aren't you going to defend it? Wasistak my kucha harsa, hag misher home. He wanted me to follow. He wanted the confrontation to happen on his terms, in his chosen arena, my own home. My choice was simple. Down the stairs, into the street, a panicked man with a piece of rebar running from a shadow. He had a key. He'd just come back later. Or I could go through that door. I could end it. Now. The rage won. I didn't think. I just acted. I pushed off the wall, a sudden explosion of movement. My shoulder hit the heavy stairwell door, shoving it open with a loud metallic groan. I was in the hallway, the ugly beige walls a blur. 3 long strides. My boots pounded on the carpet. I hit my own front door with my shoulder, slamming it all the way open. I was in. The room was silent. Empty. The couch. The coffee table. The TV. Dark and blank. Nothing was out of place. It was exactly as I had left it. Except for the laptop. It sat on the small dining table, lid open, the screen glowing. It was the only source of light in the room besides the dim glow from the hallway behind me. I crept forward, the rebar held tight in my fist, low against my leg. My eyes scanned every corner, every shadow. The kitchen entry, the coat closet. Nothing, just the hum of the refrigerator. My eyes snapped back to the laptop. A chat window was open on the screen, a single, blinking cursor. Then, letters appeared, typed out one by one. Fast. Precise. Backquote, you're here, backquote. A pause. Backquote, good. Backquote. Backquote. I'm in here. Backquote. My blood ran cold. The words hung on the screen, a stark, digital pronouncement. In here. My gaze slid from the laptop to the only other room. The bedroom. Its door was also ajar, a dark slit in the wall. He was in my bedroom. This was it. The final move in his game. He had herded me from the street, through the hallway, through the living room, and funneled me to this single point, this single door. There was no more planning. No more thinking. There was only the rebar in my hand and the monster in my bedroom. I let out a sound, a raw bellow that was part scream, part war cry. I charged. The few feet across the living room carpet felt like a mile. I didn't reach for the knob. I drew back my right leg and kicked. My foot connected with the cheap, hollow-core wood just below the handle. The door exploded inward with a splintering crack, slamming against the inside wall. He was there, standing in the middle of the small room, his back to me. Just like in the hallway. The same dark hoodie, the same jeans. He was perfectly still, looking at the far wall as if admiring a painting. The sheer arrogance of it sent another jolt of fire through me. Turn around, I snarled, my voice a ragged mess. He did. Slowly, with that same measured, deliberate motion. He pivoted on his feet, his body uncoiling to face me. The hood still hid his face in shadow. I didn't wait. I didn't give him a chance to speak, to move, to do anything. I lunged forward, swinging the rebar in a vicious arc aimed at his head. He was fast. He ducked under the swing, the iron bar whistling through the air where his skull had been, and slammed into my side. The breath left my lungs in a painful rush. We crashed into the dresser. A glass of water and a pile of loose change went flying. He was strong, stronger than he looked, his arms like steel bands wrapping around my torso, trying to pin me, to wrestle the rebar from my grip. I twisted, slamming my elbow back into what I hoped was his face. I felt a soft impact, and he grunted. His grip loosened for a second, just enough. I brought the rebar up between us, a short, sharp jab into his gut. He gasped, doubling over. I shoved him back, creating space. He stumbled into my desk, sending my monitor crashing to the floor with a pop and a shatter of plastic and glass. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a demon. He was flesh and blood, and he could be hurt. He came at me again, lower this time, a football tackle aimed at my knees. I sidestepped, my back hitting the closet door. He missed, his shoulder slamming into the wall. He recovered instantly, spinning, his hand lashing out. He grabbed my wrist, the one holding the rebar. His grip was incredible. He twisted. Pain, white-hot and blinding, shot up my arm. My fingers went numb. The rebar clattered to the floor. He had me disarmed. His other hand shot for my throat. I threw myself backward, tripping over my own feet. We both went down in a heap, a tangle of limbs on the cluttered floor. My head hit the carpet with a dull thud. He was on top of me, his weight pressing down, his hand scrabbling for a grip on my neck. I could smell his sweat, a sharp coppery scent of adrenaline. I bucked, trying to throw him off, my fists hammering blindly at his back and sides. He was like a leech, immovable. His face was inches from mine, still a black void under the hood. I could hear his breathing, ragged and sharp. He was winning. I was losing. My arms were pinned. My legs were trapped under his. This was how it ended. Smothered on the floor of my own bedroom by a faceless thing. Desperation gave me one last surge. My right hand, free but trapped between our bodies, found something on the floor. It was hard, plastic, with a cord. The base of the broken monitor. It was heavy enough. With every ounce of strength I had left, I swung it sideways. A clumsy, awkward blow. I aimed for the side of his head. The plastic frame connected with a sickening, wet crack. He screamed. A real scream. Not a synthesized voice through a speaker, but a raw, human sound of pain. It was high-pitched, young. His entire body went rigid, then limp. He slumped sideways, rolling off me. He landed on the floor with a heavy sigh, a gasp of air escaping his lungs. He lay still. I scrambled away, crab-walking backward until my back hit the wall. I sat there, chest heaving, lungs burning. My entire body screamed in protest. Lights danced in my vision. The room was a disaster zone. Broken glass, a shattered door, an overturned chair. He didn't move. I waited for the trick, for him to leap back up, for another figure to appear in the doorway. But there was only silence. The deep, ringing silence after extreme violence. Slowly, shakily, I got to my feet. I stared down at the crumpled form on the floor. The fight was over. I had won. His head was turned away from me. The force of my blow had knocked his hood back. Dark hair, matted with sweat and a smear of blood. I took a hesitant step closer. I needed to see his face. I needed to see the monster. I nudged his shoulder with my foot. He rolled slightly onto his back. And I saw him. My breath hitched. My mind refused to process it. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't a hardened killer. It wasn't a vengeful specter from my past. It was a kid. He couldn't have been more than 17, maybe 18. His face was pale, thin, dotted with acne. His mouth was hanging open slightly, a thin line of blood trickling from the corner. But it was his eyes that broke me. They were open, wide, and they were staring right at me. They weren't filled with malice, or hatred, or cold, calculated evil. They were filled with pure, absolute terror. He was looking at me as if I was the thing in the dark, as if I was the monster. As I stood over him, breathing like an animal, my own face a mask of rage, he looked at me with the most profound fear I had ever seen. He looked more scared than I had ever been. The world was a sound. The ragged, saw-toothed sound of my own breath dragging in and out of my lungs. My heart hammered against my ribs. A trapped bird trying to break free. Everything ached. My arm, my side, my head. A low throb pulsed behind my eyes. But I was standing, and he was on the floor. The crumpled heap of him didn't make sense. The fight had been a blur of desperation and brute force, a clumsy, ugly thing. But the face on the floor didn't match the terror he'd inflicted. There was no monster here, no cold-blooded phantom, just a kid. A boy with bad skin and terrified eyes, a smear of blood at the corner of his mouth like a misplaced smudge of paint. His eyes. That's what kept me frozen. They were locked on me, not with the satisfaction of a captured foe, but with a deep, bottomless fear that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. He was looking at me like I was the shadow in the hall, like I was the thing that had just kicked down the door. My knuckles were white around the broken plastic base of the monitor. I realized I was still holding it, my arm trembling from the strain. The weapon. I let it fall from my numb fingers. It hit the carpet with a soft thud. The silence that followed was heavy, full of questions. I took a step back, my boot crunching on a shard of glass from the monitor screen. The sound made him flinch. Why? The word came out as a raw croak. It wasn't the voice of a victor. It was the voice of a man whose reality had been ripped apart. What the hell was all that? The messages? The calls? I needed it to make sense. The calculated psychological torture. Hacking my laptop, my phone. Using my mother's voice. That wasn't the work of a scared teenager. That was a different kind of evil. The kid's lips trembled. He tried to speak, but only a wet, choking sound came out. He pushed himself up with one shaking arm, his other hand clutching his side where I'd hit him. He winced, his face pale and slick with sweat. They made me. His voice was a reedy whisper, nothing like the synthesized voice from the phone. It was thin, breakable, young. They? Who is they? I demanded, my voice getting louder. The rage was gone, replaced by a churning sea of confusion. I don't know, he gasped, shaking his head. The movement seemed to cost him a huge effort. The video. They have a video of me. They said they'd send it to everyone. My school. My family. They told me everything to do, what to type, what to say. My brain refused to compute. It was like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. This sprawling, intricate web of fear was just a script, and this kid, this terrified boy, was just the actor? A video of what? I asked, my own voice dropping. A new kind of coldness was seeping into the room. He didn't answer. He just squeezed his eyes shut, a tear tracing a clean path through the grime on his cheek. It was an answer in itself. They told me to get you back inside, he mumbled, his eyes still closed. They said you had to come back, that you had to come in here, to this room. He opened his eyes again, the fear in them now mixed with a frantic urgency. He looked past me, his gaze fixed on the corner of the room. They're watching. I followed his gaze. He was looking at the small television on the dresser. The screen was black, a dark, reflective square. The red standby light glowed like a single, malevolent eye. Watching? How? The camera, he choked out, pointing a trembling finger toward the dresser. It's in the TV. They're always watching. Please, you have to. He coughed, a deep rattling sound, and a fresh trickle of blood appeared on his lips. Help! The word was cut short, not by him. Click. It was the quietest sound in the world, but it was louder than a bomb. It came from behind me, the closet door. I had been so focused on the kid, on the TV, on the impossibility of it all, that I had forgotten everything else. The room had other doors. I started to turn. Too slow. The closet door didn't creak open. It swung wide with a smooth, silent motion. A shape filled the doorway. Big. Much bigger than the kid. A solid wall of black. He wasn't wearing a hoodie. He was wearing tactical gear. A black balaclava covered his head, leaving only his eyes visible. They were flat, empty, like two polished stones. My body screamed at me to move, to run, to fight. But I was frozen. My muscles, my brain, my entire being locked in place by this sudden, brutal shift in reality. The game wasn't over. It had just moved to a new level. The boss had just entered the room. He took one step forward. In his hand was a black device. A taser. I didn't even have time to yell. He raised it. There was a faint hum, and then a crackle of blue electricity jumped between the two prongs. He lunged, not with the frantic energy of the kid, but with an efficient, brutal economy of motion. I tried to throw myself sideways. My feet tangled in the mess on the floor. I stumbled. The prongs hit me high on my back, near my shoulder. My world exploded into white light and fire. It wasn't a shock. It was a complete system failure. Every muscle in my body ceased at once, pulling in 1,000 different directions. A scream was trapped in my throat, my lungs clenched in a vice. My vision fractured into 1,000,000 pieces. The smell of ozone and burning fabric filled my nose. I was aware of falling, but I couldn't feel the impact. I was just offline. My cheek was pressed against the carpet. The fibers scratched my skin. My body was at dead weight, but my mind was still on, a flickering, powerless observer. I heard a soft thud as my own head bounced once on the floor. I couldn't move. I could only watch. My vision was a blurry tunnel, focused on the scene a few feet away. The man in black stood over the kid. The kid looked up at him, the terror in his eyes replaced by a look of utter, final resignation. He knew this man. He knew what was coming. The man reached into a pouch on his tactical vest. He pulled out a syringe. It was small, pre-filled with a clear liquid. A tiny air bubble floated inside. He flicked it once with his finger, the motion calm and practiced. He knelt down, grabbing the kid by the hair and tilting his head back, exposing the side of his neck. The kid didn't fight. He didn't even whimper. He just let out a long, slow sigh, as if he was tired. So tired. The man pushed the needle into the kid's neck. He depressed the plunger. The clear liquid vanished. He pulled the needle out, wiped it on the kid's sweatshirt, and put it back in his pouch. The kid's body went slack. His head lolled to the side. The light in his eyes went out. He was gone. Not like a life being taken, but like a switch being flipped. One moment here, the next, not. My own consciousness was fading. The edges of my vision were turning dark, closing in. A deep, heavy blackness was pulling me under. But before it took me completely, I saw one last thing. The man in black stood up. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the body of the boy on the floor. He looked up. His gaze was directed at the ceiling, just above my head. He reached up one gloved hand. He adjusted something. Something small, something I hadn't noticed. The smoke detector. He twisted its white plastic casing just a fraction of an inch. A tiny, precise movement. It was a practice gesture. A technician making a final check. He was fixing the angle. A camera. A tiny, black lens, almost invisible against the white plastic. He stared directly into it. Into the lens that was pointed down at the scene. At the wreckage of my room. At the kid's body. At me, twitching on the floor. Then he nodded. A small, single nod. It wasn't for me. It wasn't for himself. It was a confirmation. A signal to someone else. Somewhere else. It's done. We got it. The blackness surged. In that final, fleeting second, one thought burned through the fog. A clear, cold, horrific understanding. The kid wasn't the monster. I wasn't the victim. We were the show. And I had just played my part perfectly. My head came back online first. Not all at once, but in sharp, agonizing fragments. A high-pitched whine screamed in my ears, the ghost of the electricity that had torn through me. Pain was a hot, jagged nail, hammered in behind my right eye. Every muscle felt like it had been twisted into a knot, then set on fire. I tried to lift a hand to my head, but it wouldn't move. My eyes cracked open. The world was a smear of colors. The beige of my living room carpet swam in and out of focus. I blinked, a thick, syrupy motion that took a huge effort. The room slowly sharpened. My TV, my coffee table, still littered with last night's takeout cartons. My bookshelf, my apartment, But something was wrong. The angle was wrong. I wasn't on the floor. A grunt was torn from my throat as I tried to shift. The movement sent a fresh wave of fire zinging down my spine. I was sitting, upright. My back was pressed against something hard. I recognized the worn fabric, the slight wobble of the right armrest. My office chair. They had dragged me out of the bedroom and put me in my own goddamn chair. I tried my hands again. They were behind me, pulled tight. Rope. It bit deep into my wrists. My ankles were bound to the legs of the chair, tight enough to cut off circulation. I could feel my feet starting to go numb. A thick strip of duct tape was plastered across my mouth, the chemical smell of it filling my nose. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through the pain. My heart started to hammer, a frantic, wild beat against my ribs. I tested the ropes, pulling, straining until my shoulders screamed in protest. Nothing. Not an inch of give. My frantic eyes scanned the room. The mess from the fight in the bedroom was gone. The shattered monitor, the broken glass, all of it. Clean. The bedroom door was closed, as if nothing had happened. The kid. Where was the kid? Aka. My head whipped around, trying to find a crumpled shape on the floor. A body. Anything. There was nothing. He was gone, as if he had never been there at all. Then I saw them. They were standing by the kitchen counter. The man in the black tactical gear was there, his balaclava still hiding his face. He was a statue of dark, quiet menace. But he wasn't alone. With him was a woman. She was his polar opposite. She wore a dark gray pantsuit, tailored so sharply it looked like it could cut glass. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, tight bun. Not a single strand was out of place. She held a tablet in one hand, occasionally swiping at the screen with a stylus. They weren't looking at me. They weren't speaking to each other. They were just there, occupying my space. The man in black had a small, clear earpiece in one ear. The woman had one too. They were listening to someone else. They ignored me completely. I was a piece of furniture they had arranged to their liking. A lamp. A coat rack. A man taped to a chair. It was all the same to them. The woman pointed the stylus at the wall above my television. The man in black gave a short, sharp nod. He walked over to a large, hard-shell case on the floor, one I hadn't noticed before. He opened it with a series of quiet clicks. The inside was filled with custom-cut foam, cradling small metallic objects. He took one out. It was a black cube, no bigger than a sugar cube, with a tiny dark lens on one side. A cord snaked from its back. He moved with an unhurried, professional calm that made my blood run cold. He walked to the TV, pulled out a small portable drill from a pouch on his vest, and drilled a tiny, almost invisible hole into the plastic frame of the television. The sound of the drill was a high-pitched clinical whine. It was a sound of violation. He threaded the cord through, then pressed the tiny black cube into the hole. It was a perfect fit, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. My mind was screaming, what the hell was happening? This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't a random attack. This was something else, something calculated. The kid's words echoed in my head. They're watching. The camera, it's in the TV. He wasn't wrong. He was just incomplete. They weren't just using the cameras that were already there. They were installing more. The woman tapped her earpiece, listened for a moment, and then pointed toward my bookshelf. The man in black nodded again. He went back to the case, retrieved another cube, and walked over to the shelf. He selected a thick, hardcover book I hadn't opened in years, took a small knife, and cut a perfect square out of the spine. He slid the camera inside, the lens peeking out through the gap in the lettering. I started to make a sound, a muffled, desperate plea against the tape. The noise was pathetic, a low hum that was swallowed by the silence. The woman's head turned slightly. For a split second, her eyes met mine. There was nothing in them. No anger, no malice, just a flat, detached appraisal. Like a biologist studying a specimen. Then she looked away, her attention returning to the man's work. I didn't matter. My fear didn't matter. They were turning my home into a stage. The man moved from the bookshelf to the fake succulent my sister had given me for Christmas. He parted the plastic leaves and nestled another camera deep inside, its lens staring out from the greenery. He moved to the picture frame on the end table, a photo of my parents smiling on a beach. He carefully peeled back the cardboard backing, affixed a camera, and sealed it back up. He was an artist of surveillance, a technician of terror. Every corner, every angle, they were leaving no blind spots. The reality of it hit me with the force of a physical blow. The chase, the messages, the fear, the fight with the kid, his death. It was all content. It was all footage. That nod I saw before I passed out, that was the director yelling, "Cut!" And this was them setting up for the next scene, for season 2. A cold, heavy dread settled in my gut, a weight far heavier than the ropes. This wasn't going to end with a quick death in my living room. That would be a mercy. They weren't here to kill me. They were here to produce me. The man in black finished his work. He packed his tools away with the same methodical precision. The case clicked shut. He stood by the door, a silent guardian waiting for his next order. The woman did one last sweep of the room on her tablet. She swiped, she tapped. Then she walked towards me. My body went rigid. I tried to push myself away, to slide the chair back, but it was useless. Every muscle strained against the ropes. The tape over my mouth was wet with panicked breath. She stopped directly in front of me. She didn't speak. She just looked at me with those dead, empty eyes. She was close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something expensive and clean that didn't belong in the middle of this nightmare. Slowly, she raised a hand. I flinched, squeezing my eyes shut. I expected a slap, a needle, a knife. Instead, a single, manicured finger touched my chin. It was cold. She tilted my head up, forcing me to meet her gaze. She studied my face, her expression unreadable. She wasn't looking at a person. She was looking at a product. Checking the merchandise. Her eyes flicked down to the duct tape, then to the ropes at my wrists and ankles. She leaned over, her face close to mine, and gave one of the knots at my ankle a sharp testing tug. It was secure. She seemed satisfied. She straightened up, gave the man in black a curt nod, and turned her back on me. She walked to the front door as if she were leaving a business meeting. The man followed. He pulled the door open, she stepped out, and he followed, pulling it shut behind him. The sound of the lock was deafening. Click, click, the deadbolt. Then, silence. A profound, absolute silence. I was alone. For a moment, I just sat there, the sound of my own ragged breathing filling the room. Then the desperation hit. I thrashed in the chair, a raw, animal terror taking over. I threw my weight from side to side, hoping to topple it, to break something, anything. The chair legs scraped against the floor, but the ropes held fast. I screamed against the tape, a useless, muffled roar of fury and fear. It was no use. I was exhausted. My muscles burned, my head throbbed. I slumped forward, defeated, the rough weave of the carpet all I could see. Minutes crawled by. The only sound was the frantic thump-thump-thump of my own heart. I slowly raised my head, my eyes darting around the room. My prison. My home. My gaze settled on the television screen. It was black, a dark, polished mirror. It reflected the room back at me, a distorted, wide-angle view of my own personal hell. I could see the bookshelf, the plant, the picture frame. I could see myself. A pathetic figure, bound and helpless in the center of the frame. And then I saw it. In the upper right-hand corner of the television's black screen, a dot of light. Tiny. Red. It wasn't a reflection. It was coming from inside the TV, from the tiny hole the man had drilled. It glowed with a steady, unwavering light. A recording light. It had never been there before. My breath caught in my throat. My eyes shot to the bookshelf. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there. I looked toward the plastic plant. I knew it was there, too, in the picture frame, in the smoke detector above my head. They were all on. They were all watching. I stared at my own reflection in the dark screen, a prisoner on display. The red light glowed back at me, a single, malevolent eye. It wasn't waiting. It wasn't on standby. The show had already begun. The ropes ground into my wrists. Every pull sent a bolt of white-hot agony from my hands to my shoulders. I twisted, trying to use the chair's weight for leverage. The legs scraped on the wood floor. A harsh, grating sound in the dead quiet. It didn't matter. The knots didn't give. Not a millimeter. My lungs burned. I was gasping against the tape, my breath hot and wet against my own skin. The chemical smell of the adhesive filled my head. My ankles were numb. 2 blocks of dead meat tied to the chair. Useless. It was all useless. I stopped, slumping forward. My head hung, sweat dripping from my hair onto the carpet. I was a prisoner, a display. The raw animal terror from before was settling into something colder, something heavier. My eyes scanned the room again. My home. My prison. The camera in the TV frame, its little red eye glowing. The one hidden in the spine of a book I hadn't touched in years. The one nestled in the fake plant. The one staring from the photo of my parents. They were tiny, black, and absolute. They saw everything. The silent, unblinking audience to my despair. This was my world now. These 4 walls. This chair. And the eyes. I stared at my own reflection in the black mirror of the TV. A man bound and defeated. A prop in his own life. The red light was a tiny drop of blood in the darkness. It wasn't waiting. It wasn't on standby. The show was on. My world was the sound of my own heart hammering against my ribs. A frantic, desperate drumbeat. Thump, thump, thump. I closed my eyes, trying to think. Trying to find a way out of a problem I couldn't even define. Robbery? No revenge? For what? The kid. They killed him. They cleaned it up. They reset the stage. For what? Bloop. My eyes snapped open. The sound was small, electronic. It came from the kitchen counter. My smart speaker. The little ring of blue light pulsed once, then settled. Silence. My mind raced. A glitch? A power surge? It happened sometimes. Just a random. The voice that spoke was not a computer's. It was hers. The woman in the pantsuit. The same flat, professional tone. Not from the hallway. From the speaker, right here in the room with me. Clear as a bell. Hello, contestant number 7? Alex? The blood in my veins turned to ice. My struggles stopped. My breathing stopped. I stared at the small, gray cylinder on the counter. It was a tool I used to check the weather, to play music. Now it was their mouthpiece. Congratulations on completing the pilot. Pilot? What the hell was she talking about? My mind was a blank wall of noise. I tried to scream a question, but it only came out as a muffled, pathetic groan against the tape. M, 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 P, H. The voice continued, patient and undisturbed, as if I hadn't made a sound. The network is very pleased. Your engagement metrics were impressive, especially the final confrontation. The audience responded well to the raw emotion. Audience? Network? My thoughts were catching on the words like barbs. The kid's face flashed in my mind, him choking on the floor. The woman nodding. It wasn't an order to stop. It was a director calling cut. They weren't criminals. They were producers. And the kid's death? That was a ratings spike. A wave of nausea rolled through me. I felt the acid rise in my throat, and I swallowed it back down, a hot burn behind the tape. Welcome, Alex, the voice said, the words echoing slightly in my small apartment. Welcome to the rabbit hole. The rabbit hole? The name sounded absurd, like something from a dumb movie, but there was nothing funny about it now. Nothing fake. It was the name of the cage I was in. The Rabbit Hole is a fully interactive, live-streamed survival experience, broadcast exclusively to a select clientele. Our viewers value authenticity. They're tired of scripts and actors. They want to see real stakes, real fear, real consequences. The voice was a scalpel, peeling back the layers of my reality. Every word was a deeper cut. This wasn't happening to me by accident. I was chosen. I was cast. The messages, the flickering lights, the chase. It was all a screen test, and I had passed. You have now advanced to Season 1. Your first official challenge begins now. My heart was a jackhammer. I started thrashing again, a wild, pointless burst of adrenaline. I threw my weight side to side, the chair legs screaming against the floor. I didn't care about the pain in my shoulders, the fire in my wrists. I just needed to move, to fight, to do something. Please remain calm, Contestant 7, the voice said, its tone unchanged. Your agitation is compelling, but you should conserve your energy. The rules for this round are simple. Survive for the next 24 hours. 24 hours. Survive what? Her? The man in black? More of them? Everything in this apartment is now a part of the game. The lights, the television, the locks on your doors and windows, the water from your faucet, the gas in your stove. It is all under our control. Consider this apartment your game board. The room seemed to shrink. The walls closed in. The air grew thick. Every familiar object was now a potential weapon. My TV. My bookshelf. My stove. They weren't just watching me through them. They could use them against me. My home, my only sanctuary, had been turned into an elaborate, high-tech death trap. There are resources hidden within the apartment, and there are dangers. It is up to you to navigate them. Our audience will be able to interact. They can vote to help you or to hinder you. They can send gifts, or they can trigger traps. It all depends on how entertaining you are. My God, a game show. A fucking snuff game show. I was a rat in a maze, and a faceless, paying crowd was watching from above, placing bets and pulling levers just to see if I'd get the cheese or the electric shock. The objective is survival, the voice repeated, a cold, hard fact. Succeed, and you will be granted your freedom, along with a substantial financial reward for your participation. Payout is commensurate with audience scores. Freedom. The word was a joke, a punchline. What good was freedom after this? How could a person ever feel safe again? Fail. The voice paused for a fraction of a second. It was the first hint of anything other than perfect monotone. A calculated dramatic beat. Well, let's just say there are no multi-season contracts for contestants who lose. A chill that had nothing to do with the room temperature washed over me. This was it. A death sentence delivered through a smart speaker. We value a proactive contestant, Alex. To that end, your physical restraints will be disengaged in precisely 5 minutes. The game begins when you are free to move. Make it a good show. The voice went silent. The blue light on the speaker winked out. And then there was only the sound of my own ragged breathing and the thumping in my chest. 5 minutes. My eyes shot to the digital clock on the cable box. 1:17 a.m. The restraints would come off at 1:22 a.m. The waiting was a new kind of torture. A silent, screaming countdown. My mind raced, a stampede of panic. What happens at 1:22? What's the first test? Does the door fly open? Does the room fill with gas? Is there a man with a knife waiting for the exact moment the ropes fall? Just stared at the red camera light on the TV. It stared back. Judging. Waiting. The audience. I could almost feel them. Hundreds of them? Thousands? Leaning forward in their chairs, somewhere in the dark, watching the feed from camera 1. A close-up on a terrified man taped to a chair. My eyes darted to the clock. 1:18 a.m. 4 minutes. I tried to slow my breathing, tried to think. You're a contestant. Play the game. The thought was insane, an act of surrender. But what choice did I have? I couldn't fight an enemy who was in the walls and the wires. I had to play. I had to survive. First step, get free. Don't just sit here like a victim when the ropes fall. Be ready to move. Where? The kitchen. A knife. The biggest one I had. It was a start. My eyes darted to the clock. 1:19 a.m. 3 minutes. The silence was a wait. I could hear the faint, high-pitched whine of the electronics in the room. The hum of the refrigerator. The sound of blood roaring in my ears. Every tiny sound was magnified, a potential threat. Was that a floorboard creaking in the hall? No. Just the building settling. Or was it? I imagined the woman and the man in black. Where were they? In a van down the street? In a studio somewhere? Watching me on a bank of monitors? Were they laughing? Clock. 1:20 a.m. 2 minutes. My muscles tensed. I prepared myself. The moment the ropes released, I would explode out of this chair. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cower. Kitchen. Knife. Then what? The windows? The door? She said they controlled the locks. Was that a bluff? I had to try. I had to test the boundaries of the cage. 1:21 a.m., 1 minute, 60 seconds. My gaze was locked on the clock. My entire world had contracted to those 4 green numbers. I held my breath. My body was a coiled spring. Every nerve ending was on fire. 50 seconds. 40. I could feel the sweat on my forehead. 30. 20. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. 10. 9. 8. I braced myself. 7. 6. 5. I closed my eyes. 4. 3. 2. 1. Click. ZZZT. The sound was shockingly loud, a sharp, mechanical snap from the knots at my wrists and ankles. The ropes went slack, falling away onto the floor. I was free. For a split second, I didn't move. The sudden absence of pressure was disorienting. Then, a tidal wave of pins and needles shot through my hands and feet as blood rushed back into them. The pain was sickening. I shoved myself up from the chair, stumbling. My legs were weak, unresponsive. I caught myself on the back of the sofa, my body screaming in protest. I ripped the duct tape from my mouth. The sound was like tearing skin, and a raw cry of pain and air was torn from my throat. I stood there, panting, in the center of my living room. I was free. I was standing. My hands were my own. I looked at the kitchen, at the knife block on the counter. I looked at the front door, at the deadbolt. I looked at the window that led to the fire escape, and I looked at the red camera light on the TV, and the one on the bookshelf. And I knew, without seeing them, that they were all on, all watching. The voice had said, "The game begins when I'm free to move." Freedom was not the prize. Freedom was the starting pistol. The cage wasn't the ropes or the chair. It was the room, and the game had just begun. My legs were jelly. My hands shook, the pins and needles a swarm of biting ants under my skin. I took a breath, my first real one in what felt like hours, and it tasted of old tape and my own sour fear. I was standing in the center of my prison, a lab rat with the cage door finally open. Freedom. It was the starting pistol. The red eyes. They were still there, watching. My first thought wasn't the door, or the window. It was them, the audience. I had to blind them. I had to cut the feed. My eyes locked onto the television. The red pinprick of light glowed just below the brand name, a tiny, malevolent star. I didn't think. I lunged. My shoulder hit the back of the couch, a dull thud of pain, but I didn't stop. My fist, clumsy and numb, slammed into the TV frame. The first punch just cracked the plastic casing. Not good enough. I drew my arm back and drove the heel of my palm, hard, right into the camera. A fizz and a pop. The red light died. One down. My head snapped toward the bookshelf, to the thick spine of a history book I'd never read. I scrambled over, my weak legs stumbling on the rug. I tore the book from the shelf, ripping at the spine with my fingernails. It wouldn't give. I slammed it against the edge of the shelf once, twice. The binding split. Inside, nestled in a hollowed-out cavity of paper, was another one, a tiny black lens connected to a tangle of wires. I clawed it out, my fingers clumsy, and smashed it under my heel on the hardwood floor. The crunch of plastic and glass was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. 2. The fake plant in the corner. I kicked it over. The pot shattered, black soil spilling across the floor like dried blood. I tore the plastic leaves apart, searching for the telltale glint. Nothing. Where was it? My eyes darted around the room, frantic. The photo of my parents on the end table. My God. I snatched it up. Their smiling faces looked back at me. A memory from a better world. I turned it over, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Tape to the back, small and black. I ripped it off, the tape taking a layer of cardboard with it, and threw it against the wall. It was too small to make a sound. 3, 4, 5? How many were there? I spun in a circle, panting. My gaze swept the ceiling corners, the air vents, the smoke detector. I saw nothing. But that meant nothing. They were good at this. Professionals. I was an amateur tearing his own home apart while they watched from angles I couldn't even guess. The feeling didn't go away. The feeling of being a bug under a magnifying glass. The feeling of 1,000 unseen eyes burning into my back. I couldn't get them all. It was impossible. I was just giving them a show. Wrecking my own stuff. A frantic animal caught in the light. And then a soft digital chime. The kind a smart TV makes when it turns on. The screen I had just smashed flickered to life. Not the whole screen. Just a jagged, spiderwebbed section in the middle, the pixels glowing in a distorted patch of light. It was enough. The image was grainy, shot from a low angle. A familiar floral print couch. A coffee table with a stack of magazines. My mother was sitting there, knitting. My father was next to her, asleep, his head tilted back, his mouth slightly open. It was their living room. 200 miles away. The timestamp in the corner of the feed was from 10 minutes ago. My blood ran cold. The voice from the kitchen speaker, flat and calm, broke the silence. They looked comfortable. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the broken screen, at the live feed of my parents, completely unaware. They were a part of the game now. They were on the board. The image on the TV changed. The broken pixels reformed, displaying a website. It was stark, minimalist. Black background, white text. It looked like an auction site. There was a single listing. Item number 4, B, the progenitors. Below the title was the live feed of my parents, now minimized in a small window. Next to it, a block of text. Description: one breeding pair, late 60s. Fair health. Currently in a docile state. Location: undisclosed. Ideal for emotional leverage or Tier 3 consequence packages. My stomach heaved. I stumbled back, catching myself on the arm of the couch. This couldn't be real. A bidding timer appeared. It started counting down from 20 minutes. Below it, a poll with 2 options. Visit them now. Leave them alone for now. The numbers next to the options started to tick up. Hundreds. Then thousands. The bar for visit them now was filling up faster. The audience is voting, contestant number 7. The voice said, its tone as neutral as a weather report. They're weighing your entertainment value against their curiosity. It seems you're lagging in the polls, Alex. No, I whispered. The word was a dry rasp in my throat. I tried again, louder. No! Leave them out of this, please! I was screaming now, a raw, desperate roar at a gray cylinder on my kitchen counter. They have nothing to do with this. Take me. Do whatever you want to me. Just leave them alone. I was begging, pleading to a faceless mob through a disembodied voice. Give them a better show then, the voice replied, with no change in inflection. Perhaps they'll change their minds. Silence. Then, a new sound. It started faint. A baby crying. It wasn't coming from the speaker. It was coming from all around me, from inside the walls. A high, miserable wail that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. I clapped my hands over my ears. It didn't help. The sound was inside my head. Then another sound joined it. Scratching. At the front door. Not a mouse. Not a dog. It was the sound of fingernails. Long fingernails digging into the wood. Scrape. 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 Slow, deliberate, and loud. The baby cried louder. I backed away from the door, my eyes wide. "What do you want?" I screamed at the empty room. "What do you want from me?" "My name." "Alex." It was a whisper. It came from the TV speaker. "Alex." From the smart speaker in the kitchen. "Alex." From my own phone, lying face down on the coffee table. The whispers were layered, coming from every direction, weaving through the sound of the crying baby and the scratching at the door. They were turning my home into a choir of madness. I was at the center of a tightening circle of sound, and the walls were closing in. Click. All the sounds stopped at once. The crying, the scratching, the whispers. The silence that followed was a physical blow, a sudden crushing weight. My ears rang. The bathroom door handle turned. It swung inward, slowly, a plume of thick, hot steam billowing out into the living room like a ghostly tongue. The air grew heavy, humid. I stared, frozen. The steam swirled and parted, revealing the mirror over the sink. It was completely fogged over, except for the words. Someone had written on it with their finger. Huge, sprawling letters that took up the whole surface. "You will kill them." My reflection began to appear as the steam slowly faded. A stranger stared back at me. A man with wild, terrified eyes. His hair was slick with sweat, his face pale and grimy. His mouth was a tight, grim line. A madman. This wasn't me. This was what they had made. The thing they were selling tickets to see. This face was going to be the last thing my parents ever saw. The thought broke me. No! A guttural roar ripped from my chest. It wasn't a word. It was pure rage, pure terror. I launched myself from the couch, crossing the room in 3 steps. I didn't slow down. I didn't stop. I drew my fist back and smashed it into the face of the monster in the mirror. The impact was a brutal crunch. Glass exploded. 1,000 sharp cracks echoed in the small room. Pain, white-hot and blinding, shot up my arm from my knuckles to my shoulder. I fell back, clutching my hand, landing hard on my knees among the glittering shards on the tile floor. Blood welled up between my fingers, hot and slick. I looked at the damage. The mirror was gone, replaced by a spider web of cracks in the drywall and a few jagged teeth of glass still clinging to the frame. I stayed there, on my knees, breathing in ragged gasps. The pain in my hand was a dull, throbbing anchor in the storm of chaos. It was real, something I could focus on. Then I saw it, in a large, tapered shard of mirror lying on the floor. It wasn't reflecting me. It was reflecting a part of the ceiling, a corner where the wall met the ceiling, just above the shower curtain rail. An angle I never saw. There was something there. Not a tiny pinprick, not something hidden in a book. It was black, round, and bigger, a real lens. Polished glass. It was mounted on a small, motorized gimbal, the kind used for professional videography. As I watched, the lens whirred, a sound so faint I wouldn't have heard it if the room wasn't dead silent. It was zooming in on my bleeding hand, zooming in on my face. It had been placed there for this exact moment, for the close-up. The voice returned, this time with the slightest trace of something new in its tone. Something that sounded like approval. Something that sounded like satisfaction. "Good," it said from the kitchen. "The viewership is spiking." My hand was a mess of fire and broken glass. Blood, slick and hot, dripped from my knuckles onto the tile, each drop a tiny, dark star in the glittering field of my shattered reflection. My breath came in ragged, shallow bursts. I could hear it. I could hear the expensive whir of the camera lens in the ceiling, a tiny motor making minute adjustments. Focusing, getting the perfect shot of the damage. Good. The viewership is spiking. The words echoed in the bathroom. The voice wasn't angry. It wasn't menacing. It was a producer noting a successful take. My pain, my fear, my desperation. It was just a metric. A number on a chart. The bloodier the scene, the better the ratings. Smashing things, screaming, bleeding. That was the product. I was giving them exactly what they wanted. I was playing their game by their rules, and I was losing so badly I hadn't even known I was playing. The realization hit me harder than the mirror had hit my fist. It was a cold wave that washed through the heat of my rage, leaving me shivering on the floor. I wasn't a victim fighting an attacker. I was a gladiator in an arena, and my fury was the spectacle. My only weapon was my own self-destruction. No, I couldn't win that way. They would just keep selling tickets until I was a smear on the floor. I had to change the show. Slowly, painfully, I got to my feet. My knees cracked. Shards of glass bit into the skin of my good hand as I pushed myself up. I ignored the sting. I looked past the wrecked bathroom, past my bleeding hand wrapped in a wad of toilet paper, and into the living room. The broken television screen still glowed with its sick auction site. The timer for my parents was still ticking down. 14 minutes left. The numbers next to the poll options had climbed into the tens of thousands. The bar for Visit Them Now was over 70% full. My rampage hadn't swayed them. It had entertained them. My eyes found the camera on the TV, the one whose lens I'd driven my palm into. It was dead. But I knew there were others. The one on the bookshelf, the one inside the photo frame, and the professional one, the one I had just discovered, still humming softly in the corner of the bathroom ceiling. There were more. Maybe dozens. I couldn't destroy them all. But maybe I didn't have to. I walked out of the bathroom, my steps deliberate. I didn't stumble. I didn't run. I walked to the center of the living room, right where I was at the beginning. I stood there, exposed. I picked a spot on the wall, just above the black rectangle of the TV, where I guessed another lens might be hidden. I stared at it. I wasn't looking at a camera anymore. I was looking through it. I cleared my throat. The sound was small in the quiet room. "Hello?" I said. My voice was hoarse but steady. "Can you hear me?" Silence. The timer on the screen ticked down. 13:42. "I mean you," I said, my voice getting stronger. I gestured vaguely at the walls, at the ceiling. The ones watching. Not the one talking. You. I waited. Nothing. "Is this fun?" I asked. The question hung in the air. "Is this what you do on a Tuesday night? You watch this? A man in his apartment, scared out of his mind?" The numbers on the poll wavered. A few ticks down on the visit option. A few up on leave them alone. It was working. It was a fraction of a percent, but it was something. "My name is Alex. Alex Carter. I'm 32 years old. I work in data entry. It's boring, but it pays the rent. Most of the time, I felt a strange, detached calm settle over me. I was just talking. My father, the man you're looking at on that screen, he taught me how to ride a bike. I fell and scraped my knee right here." I pointed to a faint white scar just below my kneecap. "He carried me all the way home. My mom made me hot chocolate. She always puts too many marshmallows in it." The voice cut in from the kitchen speaker. The tone had changed. The placid neutrality was gone. It was replaced by a sharp, metallic edge. An annoyance. "Contestant 7, you are in violation of terms. You are breaking the fourth wall. This is your first warning." I ignored it. My eyes stayed locked on the spot on the wall. "I don't know who you are. I don't know why you're doing this. But those people on that screen are real. They're good people. They don't deserve this. Whatever I did to get here, this isn't on them. This is on me." The numbers on the poll flickered again. "Leave them alone," jumped a full percentage point. A surge of something that wasn't terror, something that might have been hope, shot through me. I was reaching them. They weren't a mob. They were individuals, people, and people could be reasoned with. I had a dog when I was a kid. A mutt named Buster, I continued, the memories coming unbidden. He used to sleep at the foot of my bed every night. One time. Warning 2. the voice snapped. It was louder now. Harder. Cease this line of communication immediately. Return to the established parameters of the program. I took a breath. When I was in college, I wanted to be an architect. I had notebooks full of drawings, houses, buildings, bridges. I wasn't very good, but I loved it. I loved the idea of making something that would last, something real. The leave them alone bar hit 30%. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the real fight. Not with my fists, but with my words, with my life. Final warning, contestant 7. The voice was low, a threatening growl that vibrated from the speaker. Deviate again, and there will be immediate punitive action. The audience's vote will be suspended. I almost stopped. The threat was clear. But then I looked at the TV, at the small window showing my mother adjusting her glasses, completely oblivious, my father, stirring in his sleep. I couldn't stop. My eyes scanned the room, hunting. Not for an exit, for a target. There, the large, generic painting of a seascape hanging across from the couch. It was too perfectly centered, too bland. The frame was just a little too thick. I looked directly at it. My whole life. It wasn't anything special. It was just a life. It was mine. I walked toward the painting. Stop! The voice wasn't a voice anymore. It was a roar. A distorted digital shriek that came from every speaker at once. The kitchen, the TV, my phone. It was a sound of pure electronic rage. The air vibrated. I didn't flinch. I reached the painting, grabbed the frame, and ripped it from the wall. The hook screeched. Behind it, just as I thought, was a square hole cut into the drywall. Inside, another gimbal-mounted camera, its black lens swiveling to track me. My bloody hand was still clutching the shard of mirror I had picked up from the bathroom floor. It was sharp, tapered to a point. I didn't hesitate. I drove it, hard, into the center of the lens. There was a crunch of glass on glass, a shower of sparks. The camera went dead. The roaring from the speakers cut off instantly. The silence that followed was absolute. It pressed in on my eardrums. I stood there, panting, the mirror shard still in my hand, my knuckles screaming in protest. The timer on the screen read 9:16. The poll was frozen at 67%. Then came the sound, a soft hiss. It was quiet, so quiet I almost missed it. It came from the circular air vent on the ceiling, in the center of the room, a faint, continuous hiss, like a slow leak from a tire. I looked up. I couldn't see anything, but I could smell it, a smell like almonds, a sweet, chemical smell that coated the back of my throat. It was thick. It was cloying. My head felt light. The edges of my vision swam. The audience has voted for a penalty, the voice said. It was back to its old self, calm, collected, almost gentle. Contestant 7 has been uncooperative. He has attempted to damage the integrity of the broadcast. I stumbled back, my hand going to my throat. It was getting harder to breathe. The room was tilting. The penalty is a mild sedative aerosol, the voice continued, smooth as silk, designed to encourage compliance and enhance the viewer experience. I coughed, a deep, racking cough that brought tears to my eyes. The sweet smell was everywhere. My legs felt like rubber. I fell against the couch, sliding down to the floor. The world was a blurry smear of light and color. The last thing I heard before the darkness took me was the voice, speaking from the kitchen, from the TV, from all around. Sweet dreams, Alex. The sweet smell wasn't a perfume. It was a thick, syrupy blanket being pulled over my head. My lungs burned for air, but only found the cloying scent of almonds. The corners of the room began to bend, to warp like heated plastic. The floor tilted under me, a slow, nauseating wave. I knew this feeling. It was the gas. They were putting me down. My body was a useless sack of meat on the floor, but my brain screamed one thing. Get up! Get out! I tried to push myself up. My arms were disconnected. 2 heavy logs someone else had left next to my torso. My fingers scraped against the wood floor, a useless, pathetic sound. I managed to roll onto my stomach. The effort sent a new wave of dizziness through me. The world was a smear of brown and white. I had to move. I had to get out of the center of the room, away from the vent in the ceiling that was hissing out my death. Crawl. Just crawl. My cheek scraped against the floorboards. 1 inch forward. Another. My vision swam back into a semblance of focus, just for a moment, and then I saw him. He was at the far end of the hallway, just emerging from the dark space of my bedroom. The boy from the video, the one they had killed. He was on his hands and knees, just like me. But he wasn't crawling, he was dragging himself. A wet, smearing sound echoed in the quiet apartment. His hair was matted with something dark. As he got closer, his head lifted. Where his eyes should have been, there were only 2 dark, empty sockets. Holes. Black holes that drank the light in the room. Not real, my mind screamed. It's the gas. A hallucination. It's the gas. But the fear was real. The cold sweat that broke out on my forehead was real. My heart, hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, was real. He kept coming, dragging himself across the floor, that awful wet sound getting louder. He was leaving a dark trail behind him. I squeezed my eyes shut. Not real, not real, not real. When I opened them again, he was gone. The hallway was empty. There was no dark trail on the floor. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It came out as a ragged sob. I had to get to the kitchen. Water. I needed water. I needed to flush this poison out. I used the leg of the couch to pull myself up, my muscles screaming in protest. I was on my feet, swaying. I held onto the wall for support, my bloody hand leaving a smeared red print on the white paint. 1 step. Then another. The room felt like the deck of a ship in a storm. Then I saw the kitchen doorway. They were standing there, Mom and Dad. They were just as they were on the TV screen. Dad in his old pajamas, Mom in her nightgown. But they were looking right at me. And they were smiling. Not their normal smiles. These smiles were too wide, stretching their mouths into grotesque shapes. "You're doing so well, Alex," my mother said. Her voice was right, but the words were wrong. They dripped with a horrible, sweet poison, just like the gas in the air. Then her skin started to change. It began to soften, to droop from her cheekbones like melting wax. It dripped from her chin onto the collar of her nightgown. My father's face was doing the same, his features slowly sliding down, pooling around his neck. Their eyes stayed fixed on me, still smiling, as their faces ran like hot candle wax. "We're so proud of the ratings," my father's voice said, gurgling through the melting ruin of his throat. I stumbled back, a scream caught in my throat. I knew it wasn't them. I knew it. But my body didn't care what my brain knew. Primal terror took over. I turned away, pressing my face into the wall, my knuckles white as I gripped the back of the couch. Fight it. It's not real. That's when the laughter started. It wasn't the single, calm voice of the producer anymore. It came from the kitchen speaker first, a low chuckle. Then it came from the dead TV, a woman's giggle. Then my phone, on the coffee table, erupted with a man's deep, booming laugh. It grew. More voices joined in. A chorus. 100, maybe 1,000 different laughs, all at once, coming from every direction. They were distorted, layered on top of each other, a rising tide of digital mockery. The sound filled the apartment, bouncing off the walls, pressing in on me. It was the audience. They were all here, in the room with me, laughing at the melting figures of my parents, laughing at me. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it did no good. The sound was inside my head. It was everywhere. I had to get away. I pushed off the couch and staggered toward the kitchen. I needed water. I needed to make the world solid again. The laughter swelled, following me. It twisted into words, fragments of sentences. Look at him. So pathetic. Thought he was so smart. Give him another dose. I fell through the kitchen doorway, my knees hitting the cool tile with a painful crack. My vision was a pinhole. Blackness was closing in. I was going to pass out, right here, on the floor, while they all laughed. This was the end. I was going to die on my kitchen floor, for their amusement. No! No! Through the haze of the gas, through the cacophony of laughter, a memory surfaced. It was useless, irrelevant, a memory from when I first moved in. The landlord had given me a cheap, photocopied packet of information. In it, a blurry schematic of the building's floor plan. I'd looked at it for 5 seconds before tossing it in a drawer. But one detail had stuck in my head, a detail that only the architect wannabe version of me would have noticed. The main fire suppression stand pipe? A 2-inch high-pressure water line? It ran vertically through all the floors. And on my floor it ran right here, right behind the thin, cheap drywall of the kitchen. My eyes shot to the wall next to the refrigerator. It was just a blank wall. Nothing there. But behind it was a way out, not an exit, an alarm. A real-world alarm. The laughter was getting louder, a roaring in my ears. The edges of my vision went completely black. I was seconds from losing it all. With the last ounce of strength in my body, I reached for the stove. My fingers fumbled, slipping off the handle of a pot before finding their mark. The heavy-bottomed frying pan. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I got my other hand on it, my trashed, bloody hands screaming in protest. I lurched to my feet, using the counter for balance. I faced the wall. "You want a show?" I gasped, the words lost in the sea of laughter. "I'll give you a fucking show." I swung the pan. The impact was a dull thud. The pan bounced off, leaving a small dent in the white paint. The laughter seemed to get louder, more mocking. I swung again. Harder. This time there was a crack. A spiderweb of lines appeared in the drywall. I could do this. I swung again. And again. It was a rhythm. My arms, my shoulders, my whole body screamed. Dust filled the air, mixing with the sweet gas. Crack. A chunk of drywall fell away, revealing the dark space within the wall. I saw it. A thick, red pipe. The laughter stopped. All at once. The sudden silence was deafening. Then, the producer's voice came back, sharp and cold, from the kitchen speaker. "Contestant 7, stop what you are doing. Immediately." I ignored it. I raised the pan high over my head, my arms shaking with the effort. My vision was almost gone. It was now or never. I aimed for the red pipe and brought the pan down with everything I had left. The sound was not a thud. It was a deafening clang of metal on metal that vibrated up my arms and into my teeth. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a shotgun blast, the pipe fitting blew. A jet of water erupted from the wall, hitting me with the force of a fire hose. It slammed me back against the cupboards. It was cold. So cold it shocked the fog from my brain. It was real. The water was real. It soaked me, washed the gas out of the air, filled my mouth, and let me breathe. And then another sound started. A high, piercing, ear-splitting shriek. The fire alarm. Not their fake sounds. The real, building-wide fire alarm. It blared from the smoke detector on the ceiling. A beautiful, horrible, wonderful noise. It was the sound of the outside world crashing in. It was the sound of help. I started to laugh, a real, gasping laugh, as the water poured over me. I had done it. I beat them. But then the producer's voice cut through the alarm. It came from every speaker at once. The TV, the kitchen, the phone. It was no longer calm or angry. It was something else. It was flat, efficient, final. Target has breached containment. Activate cleanup team. The game is over. The water was a physical blow, a solid wall of freezing force that ripped the air from my lungs and threw me back against the kitchen cabinets. The impact rattled my teeth. For a second there was only the shock, a brutal, icy baptism that extinguished the fire in my head. I gasped, sputtering, inhaling pure, clean water. It tasted like life. The alarm was a single, sustained shriek. It wasn't a digital recording from a speaker. It was real. A physical, mechanical scream that vibrated through the floor, through the walls, through my bones. It was the sound of rules being broken, the outside world tearing a hole into their sick little stage. Flashing white strobes from the smoke detector pulsed in time with the shriek, turning the chaotic scene into a series of frozen, jerky photographs. Me, on the floor, water gushing from the wall, the overturned frying pan. I laughed, a ragged, choking sound, half sob, half guffaw. Water poured over my face, washing away the blood from my hand, the sweat, the tears. I had done it. I had pushed back. "The game is over," the producer had said. Yes, it was. I had ended it. Help was on its way. Sirens. People. The real world. I just had to hold on. I tried to push myself up, my muscles still jelly from the gas, my limbs heavy with soaked clothing. The tile was slick. Everything was a blur of flashing light and cascading water. The producer's voice was gone. The audience's laughter was gone. There was only the honest, beautiful noise of the alarm and the roar of the water. Then another sound cut through it. It wasn't a siren. It was closer. A sound like a tree trunk snapping in half. A sharp, violent crack that came from the front door. I froze, my hand slipping on the wet tile. That wasn't the sound of a key in a lock. It wasn't the sound of firefighters using a tool of entry. It was the sound of brute force. The front door, my only way out, blasted inward. It didn't swing open. It exploded off its hinges, torn from the frame as if hit by a car. It crashed to the floor of the hallway with a boom that shook the whole apartment. For a heartbeat, silhouetted against the dim light of the public corridor, a figure stood there. It was a man, a big man, the same shape, the same mountain of a man from the video, from my nightmares. He wasn't wearing a firefighter's uniform. He was dressed in black from head to toe, tactical pants, a tight black shirt that strained against a thick, armored vest. A black balaclava covered his face, leaving only his eyes visible. They weren't angry or panicked. They were calm, focused. Like a surgeon entering an operating room, my blood went cold. The beautiful sound of the alarm suddenly became a countdown clock. The water that had saved me now felt like it was trying to drown me, holding me down. The cleanup team wasn't a metaphor. It was him. He stepped over the wreckage of the door, his heavy boots splashing in the water that was now flooding the hallway. He moved with a purpose that made my stomach clench. He wasn't here to assess the damage. He wasn't here to help. He was here for me. He saw me, a pathetic, soaked heap on the kitchen floor, and started walking toward me. Not running. Walking. A steady, unhurried pace. He had all the time in the world. The piercing shriek of the alarm was his soundtrack, the cover noise for his work. No, I whispered, the word lost in the deluge. I scrambled backward, my feet finding no purchase. I was a crab trying to scuttle away, my back hitting the cabinets. I was cornered. He stopped at the edge of the kitchen, his boots right at the line where the wet hardwood met the tile. The pulsing strobe light caught something in his hand. It wasn't a gun, it wasn't a knife. It was small, clinical. A glint of metal, a clear plastic tube, a syringe. The reality hit me with more force than the water had. They weren't just going to kill me. They were going to erase the narrative. The gas, the psychological torture, it would all be wiped away. When the real authorities found me, they'd find an overdose. A tragic, self-inflicted end. Contestant 7, unable to handle the pressure, took his own life. The game would remain clean. The producers would remain untouchable. I was the last piece of evidence, and he was here to dispose of me. My mind screamed, "Fight! Move! Get up!" He took another step, into the kitchen now. The water swirled around his ankles. He raised the syringe, tapping it with a gloved finger to knock an air bubble to the top. The small, professional gesture was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. Adrenaline surged through me, a chemical fire that burned away the last of the gas-induced lethargy. I wasn't an architect intern anymore. I wasn't contestant 7. I was an animal trapped in a cage that was rapidly filling with water. I lunged sideways, not up. I threw my body along the slick floor, aiming for the narrow gap between the man and the refrigerator. He was expecting me to cower or beg. He wasn't expecting an attack. My shoulder connected with his knee, the impact jarring but not enough to topple him. He grunted, stumbling a half step. It was all the opening I needed. I was on my hands and knees, crawling, scrambling through the flooded hallway toward the broken frame of my front door. Freedom was 10 feet away. The alarm screamed, encouragement. A heavy hand clamped down on the back of my soaked shirt, yanking me back with impossible strength. I was dragged across the floor like a sack of garbage, the splintered wood scraping my cheek. He threw me, not hard but efficiently, into the living room. I landed in a shallow pool of water, my head smacking against the leg of the coffee table. Stars exploded behind my eyes. He was on top of me in an instant, a knee pressing into my chest, pinning me to the floor. The weight was immense, crushing the air out of me. His face was inches from mine. Up close, I could see the cold intensity in his eyes through the holes in the mask. He didn't say a word. He just brought the syringe down toward my neck. Instinct took over. I bucked, twisted, trying to throw him off. My trashed hand, the one I'd cut on the vent, slammed against his arm. The pain was white hot, but I didn't care. I grabbed his wrist with my good hand, trying to keep the needle away from my skin. It was like trying to stop a hydraulic press. His muscles were steel cables under his skin. The needle hovered, an inch from my jugular. We wrestled in the flashing, strobe-lit darkness, the water splashing around us. It was a silent, desperate fight, drowned out by the constant wail of the alarm. I was losing. My strength was failing. The pressure on my chest was unbearable. My vision started to tunnel. My flailing left hand hit something on the floor. Something hard and sharp. I didn't know what it was. I didn't care. My fingers closed around it. An edge. A point. It was a piece of the shattered wall mirror from the hallway. A casualty of our struggle. I stopped fighting his arm. I let him push the syringe closer. A feint. With the last ounce of strength I had, I drove my left hand, clutching the shard of glass, up and into the one soft target I could reach. His thigh. There was no sound of tearing cloth, just a wet, fleshy thud. I pushed. I put every bit of my will, my fear, my rage into that single point of contact. He screamed. A real scream, high-pitched and full of shock and pain, that for a moment cut through the noise of the alarm. His entire body went rigid. The pressure on my chest vanished. The syringe clattered to the floor, lost in the churning water. He looked down at his leg, at my hand buried in his flesh, with an expression of pure disbelief in his eyes. That was the moment the world returned. Boom! The broken front door was kicked aside, and two figures in heavy yellow coats and helmets charged in. Firefighters. Behind them, two more shapes. Blue uniforms. Cops. Their flashlights cut through the gloom, beams dancing wildly across the chaotic scene. Police, don't move! The cleanup guy was a professional to the very end. Even as he collapsed, he was acting. He ripped the balaclava from his head, gasping. He tore at the tactical vest, revealing a dark blue polo shirt underneath. On the sleeve was a patch, a cheap embroidered logo. Apex Building Security. The first responders saw the scene from their perspective. The flashing alarm, the water pouring from the kitchen, and in the middle of the living room, a man in a security guard uniform, unconscious on the floor, a massive bleeding gash in his leg, and me, soaked, gasping, raising my hand from his body. My hand that was still clutching a long, wicked shard of mirror, a shard dripping with blood. His blood. The cops had their guns drawn, pointed directly at my chest. Drop it. Drop the weapon. Hands in the air. Now. My mind tried to form words. He tried to kill me. The syringe. It's a show. A game. But no sound came out. I looked from the guns pointed at me, to the unconscious security guard on the floor, to the bloody piece of glass in my hand. I was saved. And I was completely, utterly fucked. The first thing I registered was the quiet. Not silence, quiet. A steady, low beep to my right. The scratch of a coarse blanket against my chin. The distant hum of ventilation. My own breathing, shaky and shallow in my chest. I smelled something clean. Antiseptic. My eyes cracked open. The world was a white blur. White ceiling. White walls. I turned my head. An IV stand stood next to me. A clear bag dripping liquid into a tube taped to the back of my hand. My good hand. The other one was wrapped in a thick white bandage. The beep was coming from a small monitor beside the bed. A green line pulsed with my heartbeat. Too fast. I was in a hospital. A man was sitting in a plastic chair by the window. He was a cop. Blue uniform, tired eyes, a notepad resting on his knee. He saw I was awake and offered a small, professional smile. Hey there, welcome back. His voice was calm, grounded. I'm Officer Riley. You gave us quite a scare. The words came out in a rush, a jumble of panic and relief. The man, the guy in the armor, did you get him? The syringe? It was in the water. You have to find it. It's a show. A game. They call it the rabbit hole. They were watching me. They gassed me. My voice was a raw croak. Officer Riley didn't write anything down. He just listened. He had the patient look of a man who had heard 1,000 crazy stories. When I finally ran out of breath, he leaned forward, placing his elbows on his knees. Kevin, right? Kevin Tran? I nodded, my head swimming. Kevin, I need you to listen to me very carefully. He waited until my eyes focused on his. We found a gas leak in your apartment. Carbon monoxide. A bad one. The fire department said the levels were astronomical. You're lucky to be alive. I stared at him. What the hell was he talking about? No, it wasn't. It was them. They pumped it through the vent. To make me compliant. Riley's expression didn't change. It was still filled with that same damn professional sympathy. Son, at those levels, Colorado causes severe neurological symptoms. Confusion, paranoia, extreme vivid hallucinations. People see things, hear things. They believe with all their heart that what's happening is real. My blood went cold. It was real. The man you're talking about, Riley continued, his voice gentle, like he was talking a jumper off a ledge. His name is Dave Henderson. He's the building's security guard. He's been there for 5 years. He heard the fire alarm you triggered and saw smoke coming from under your door. He's a former Marine, Kevin. He did what he was trained to do. He broke down the door to get to you. To save your life. The room felt like it was tilting. The clean, antiseptic smell was suddenly cloying, thick. It smelled like a lie. The syringe, I whispered. He had a syringe. The paramedics found a diabetic pen on the floor near him, Riley said, his voice unwavering. Dave is a type 1 diabetic. His doctor confirmed it. He probably had it on him when he went in. In a high-stress situation, it must have fallen out of his pocket. His explanation was perfect. Too perfect. A neat little box that contained all my terror and dismissed it. Every piece of my nightmare explained away with a calm, rational answer. The gas. The man. The needle. It was a story designed to make me the crazy one. To make me the villain. So I'm, what, just a guy who got poisoned and attacked his rescuer? My voice didn't sound like my own. Riley's face softened. You were a guy who was being poisoned and didn't know what you were doing. You were fighting for your life against something you thought was real. No one is pressing charges, Kevin. Dave understands. He's in a room down the hall getting stitches. He just wants to know you're okay. My mind tried to scream. He's lying. They're all in on it. The producer. The cameraman. The cleanup guy. This cop. But looking at Riley's tired, sincere face, the doubt began to creep in. A tiny, poisonous seed. What if he was right? What if the gas had cooked my brain? What if I had imagined all of it? Then a woman in a white coat came in, a chart in her hand. She smiled at Riley, then at me. It was a doctor's smile. Distant, clinical. Officer. Glad to see he's awake. I can take it from here. Riley stood up. He placed a hand on my shoulder. You're safe now, son. Just rest. Let them take care of you. He gave my shoulder a squeeze and walked out, leaving me alone with the doctor. She clicked her pen. Mr. Tran, I'm Dr. Evans. We've run some tests. The amount of carbon monoxide in your system was significant. It's a miracle you didn't suffer permanent brain damage, though we'll have to monitor you. I'm not crazy, I said, the words feeling weak, pathetic. She didn't answer right away. She just made a note on her chart. You've experienced a severe trauma, both physical and psychological. It's common for the mind to create a narrative to explain the terrifying sensations of acute CO poisoning, a sense of being watched, of an external persecutor. It's textbook. Her voice was the final wall. It sealed me in. I looked at her, then around the sterile white room. This wasn't a recovery room. It was a cell. A clean, quiet, comfortable cell where my truth was a symptom of my illness. I was utterly, completely alone. I looked down and saw a soft restraint buckled around my wrist, tethering me to the bed rail. I hadn't even noticed it before. Take that off, I said, my voice rising. Take it off me. Dr. Evans' smile tightened. We can't do that just yet, Kevin. You've had a violent episode. It's just a precaution until the sedative takes full effect. What sedative? She nodded toward my IV drip. A nurse I hadn't seen enter was injecting something into the line. The cold liquid entered my vein. No! I pulled against the restraint, but it held firm. The nurse finished and left without a word. Panic exploded in my chest. They were drugging me, silencing me. You don't understand. It's a show. You have to believe me. Dr. Evans just watched me, her expression unchanging. Rest now, Kevin. The more you fight, the harder it will be. My body was getting heavy. My thoughts, once sharp with terror, began to fray at the edges, dissolving into a thick fog. My limbs felt like lead. The doctor's face swam. The beeping of the heart monitor seemed to slow down, stretching out. My head fell back against the pillow, my eyes half closed. I was losing. My gaze drifted to the small television mounted on the wall opposite the bed. It was on, the volume low, a news program. The world was a blurry, drunken haze, but the image on the screen was crystal clear. A woman with perfect blonde hair and a professional blue dress was sitting at a news desk. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, Evening News Update. And the suspect in the downtown bank robbery was apprehended just an hour ago, following a brief standoff with police, she was saying, her voice a polished, reassuring melody. The sedative was pulling me under. My eyelids fluttered. I was seconds from sleep. The anchor finished her report. She folded her papers neatly. For a half second, she just sat there, looking at the camera. Then she did something impossible. Her eyes, those professional, teleprompter-reading eyes, shifted. They seemed to look past the camera, through the screen, through the soupy air of my hospital room. They found me. They locked onto me. A small, knowing smile touched the corner of her lips. It was a smile of immense satisfaction. And that's the news for tonight, she said, her voice smooth as silk, but her eyes burning into me. We'd like to send a special message to our contestant 7, an excellent performance. Truly captivating. It's a shame, really. There are no winners in the rabbit hole, only survivors who get to play again. My heart stopped. The world froze. I was paralyzed, pinned to the bed by the drug, and by a horror so absolute it stole my breath. Just as quickly as it had happened, it was over. The anchor turned to her co-anchor with a bright smile, and they started a light-hearted back and forth about the weather. The broadcast was normal again. It was just a news show. My brain screamed that I had imagined it. The gas. The sedative. A hallucination inside a hallucination. A nurse stepped back into my room. A different one this time. She was young, with a kind face. She moved to my bedside with a quiet rustle of scrubs. Just checking on you, she said softly, her voice a gentle murmur. You need to get some sleep. She reached over and fluffed my pillow behind my head. Her touch was gentle. As she leaned close, her hair brushed my cheek. Her mouth was right next to my ear. And she whispered. It was a voice I knew better than my own, a voice that had haunted my every waking moment in that apartment. The calm, detached, female voice from the speaker. The voice of the rabbit hole itself. Rest up, number 7, she breathed. The words a wisp of ice in my ear. Season 2 will be starting soon.